the other action items and then turn it over to Mr. Maris. I'm assuming he's just running a little behind. Otherwise, everyone else is here. So let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next is residents' request to address the board. The board provides a time for public comment and committee meetings for residents and taxpayers to bring their thoughts on special agenda items to the board. But it is not a time for exchange between board administration and speaker. We ask that the speakers refrain from identifying specific students, staff, or community members by name. Each resident is provided up to 3 minutes to speak at the committee meeting on a topic identified on the meeting agenda. Residents and taxpayers who are interested in making public comments must complete the electronic registration form prior to 3 p.m. the day of the meeting. And I believe we have 2 requests.
Our first speaker this evening is Jean Pretz, who will be followed by Carolyn Hernandez.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to be here. Thanks for the chance to speak. So I'm Jean Pretz. I'm a Hempfield parent, and I'm speaking to urge you to support the resolution about the increasing state funding for public education. I don't know how closely you've been following this issue. I assume pretty closely since it's your charge as members of the board, but I became aware of this issue maybe 4 years ago. And I was completely shocked to hear that the state was being sued by 6 school districts. As a Lancaster County kid and a parent in the district of Hempfield, I always felt like we have really good schools. And then I found out this lawsuit was filed in 2014. So this issue has been going on for quite a long time. And it turns out that the lawsuit is actually very well-founded, or was well-founded. Pennsylvania ranks 42nd out of 50 states in terms of how much state funding comes to the schools. And 70% of the students in the state are in an underfunded school, and that even includes Hempfield. We feel that we're doing great, but as you all know, as you're wrestling with finances, local property taxes really take a big hit when we need to raise more money for the schools. And the reality is the state has been found to be negligent in not supporting the schools as much as they should. And so this resolution urges the state to provide sufficient funding to support public education. As you are probably aware, in February 2023, Pennsylvania, the state lost the lawsuit. The courts concluded that Pennsylvania was guilty of shortchanging public school students by not funding schools adequately. This year, Hempfield is owed $1.43 million in adequacy, special education, basic education funds to better support our students. And I know that you all would be able to steward that money very well to support our district into what it really needs. You've seen the special education costs increasing at a higher rate than what the state and federal funding has provided. There's an adequacy gap that was identified in the lawsuit. The amount that's being requested for the adequacy gap in and of itself is $680,000. That's only 11% of the actual adequacy gap, because the state legislature said, we're going to spread this out over time because this is a really big gap that we have. And so this is quite a minimal amount that's being requested. I also know that many of you are concerned about cyber charter schools. In 22-23, Hempfield sent $2.4 million of our taxpayer dollars to cyber charter schools. And these aren't the Hempfield cyber charter option. These are other schools, non-Hempfield schools, that are paying the same rate per student as it costs to educate a student in person. Other states don't do this. Other states realize it costs less.
Thank you. Sorry, your time is up.
Our last speaker is Carolyn Hernandez.
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Hernandez. I am a resident of East Hempfield Township, and in about a week, I will have a sophomore and a senior at Hempfield High School. They've gone through the Landisville campus of schools, and their experience has been nothing short of wonderful. Every time I interact with our schools, I continue to be impressed with the caliber of our teachers and staff and the rigor of the diverse curriculum that is offered to them. Our students are taking advantage of these opportunities for exploration and are not only successful, but they're thriving and excelling. I've often had aspirations of running for school board myself, but with a full-time job, running a volunteer nonprofit, and having 2 active kids, I know that the time commitment is not right for me yet. And so I'll rely on you to be the experts in championing public education and responsible stewardship for our community. I know that it's not an easy role to fill and requires time, energy, and dedication, and I thank you for yours. You are all signed up for this, so my assumption is that you are passionate about public education and are willing to do the work to make informed decisions. If you're not or don't have the time anymore, maybe this role is not for you. I'd like to urge you to pass the Hempfield School District Education Budget Resolution, and quite honestly feel like it should have been a pretty easy ask last meeting. Standing up for our school district and encouraging our legislators to provide educational funding that we need is your role. Being part of being a school board director is being knowledgeable about the funding sources and advocating for the best possible outcome for the district. Speaking up for things like increasing basic education and special education funding, charter school tuition reform, and addressing the adequacy gap all benefit our school district. Please pass this resolution, and please make the time to meet with and talk to your representatives. Some of them have even better ideas than the things that we're advocating for. Currently, you're all debating the necessary tax increase to balance the budget. It is clear that we cannot count on federal funding, and we know that the state will not be able to replace these funds. While a tax increase is never popular, it is the only surefire way to raise revenue for the district. As you know, in the last 7 years, Hempfield School District has not raised taxes to the Act 1 index. Perhaps if the board had been more forward-thinking, we would not be looking at a deficit like we are. I encourage you to pass a tax increase at 4.8% to meet the significant financial needs our district is facing. I acknowledge that many in our community will face hardship as a result of any tax increase. The reality is that the world we're living in right now costs more. No one likes tax increases, myself included. Responsible financial stewardship is not always easy, but passing a balanced budget with the tools at your disposal is a responsible decision. Furloughing teachers or decreasing the opportunities our students have should not be on the table. These are 2 things that Hempfield gets right and what makes Hempfield a great place to be. Please keep it that way.
Thank you. Mr. Maris, I'm gonna do the other action items and I'll turn it over to you.
Yep.
Okay. Next on the other action items, the first one is the resolution. At the last board meeting, the budget resolution was tabled with recommendations of changes to be made, which they were in board news, and there's copies there. If you look on your thing with the change. So at this point,
Excuse me, Mr. Donato, point of
Yeah.
order, that is the old version, not the red line.
Mr. Graham, if you could put up the red line version.
It's this
Second one. There you go.
very soon.
hopefully that's the correct one.
Yeah.
Mr. Keener, okay? Okay, Mr. Keener, correct one?
I'm sorry?
Correct one up there now?
It's,
Yeah.
just can you scroll up? That's the one that we have in board docs, yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm requesting a motion to pass this resolution.
Motion.
Thank you,
Second.
Mrs. Johnson. Second, did I hear a second? Did I miss this?
Linda.
Mrs. Johnson.
Linda.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just have one comment. I think this is where I was last time in being comfortable with the resolution. In the meantime, I did have a chance to look at some of the 25-26 budget that was proposed by the state. And I'm not comfortable with everything in that budget. And so back to my original statement that if this was removed as it is in this version, I'm comfortable with this resolution. And I think that's where we were at the end of last meeting.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor then? Okay, the resolution carries 7-0. I believe the goal is for all of us, or 9-0, I'm sorry. I can't count tonight. I have the revised copy here. I believe the goal is to have everyone sign it, so I'll make sure everyone signs it at the end of the meeting. And then I'll give it
Mr.
to,
Donato, point of procedure, shouldn't the board secretary, board secretary simply signs resolution on behalf of the board, right?
that's,
When we did this last time, all the board members signed it.
I know what we did last
Yeah.
time. I'm saying as a matter of procedure, it's not, I mean, I'm happy to sign it either way. I'm just procedurally, the board secretary and or the board president sign on behalf of the board. It's not typically that all 9 board members sign every pronouncement of the board. Unless that's something we want to do going forward.
Just following what we did last time.
I'm happy to sign it.
okay. I guess at this point, it probably would be better either we all sign it or I'll just sign it. Does anyone object to signing it at the end of this? Okay, then we'll do it that.
I'm fine with signing it. I'm just asking
Yeah.
why this is.
The
being
only
done.
thing I remember is the last time and the one time when I was PSBA one and we brought up funding about, I believe it was appropriate funding for cyber charter schools. And I believe we all signed it at that time. So that's the only thing I remember. Okay. Moving on. The next item is the elementary science curriculum. From reading this, the recommendation from the administration is to approve option 2, which is the PhD science program for kindergarten through 5, and then Twig Science for grade 6 with it. So I need a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Brady. Discussion. Go ahead, Mr.
First of all, I need to ask a question. Must this be approved tonight and why? And the reason I ask that question is because I spent some time doing some additional research on what some other districts are doing and got some information. And I have a little more research to do on that yet because I haven't made contact with the person I need to yet. But some other districts are using some different things. They're using programs that I'm going to give you a roundabout number that to be in line with the Steele's standards would cost about $300,000 versus the 1.6 million, I think, that we had on the table. Forget about the fact that we had leftover money. I'm talking about the real cost. So my question and my concern is that we haven't truly vetted all of our options. And we're about to spend over $1 million, $1.5 million on a program when I believe there are other options out there. And one of the options that I would suggest maybe be considered, or at least looked at if it hasn't been, is the Smithsonian Science. I also would suggest that as part of Savas has experienced science as part of their program. I don't know if that's part of what we have through Savas, but I'm not going to go down the road of why I'm disappointed we don't have them to begin with, but here may be another reason why, because they could fill some of that gap. The cost of that, to get that at every level, looks like it's about $300,000, give or take a little bit. So have we looked at that program and have we explored enough of other options to be ready to make this financial decision tonight? I'm concerned about the decision more than I was when I was here at the last meeting. So I guess somebody could answer the timeline for me and suggest why it needs to be voted on tonight, and can we have additional time to research this? And why didn't we look at some of these less expensive options?
So I know Mr. Hoffman and Dr. Dandridge shared kind of programs they looked at, the process in prior discussions. The reason we need to move on purchasing is because we need to get the 6th grade material in We are on a tight timeline due to, with the end of the school year coming and needing to do training for staff, particularly with the sixth grade program. Everything else then thereafter comes from all the shipping and everything so that we have it in time for the start of the school year. But the sixth grade piece is the critical one for us, which is Twig. Mr. Hoffman, is that correct? And Dr. Dandridge will be back here to address the student matter, so.
We consider the Smithsonian program or any other programs. And what was our rationale for maybe choosing two of what seemed to be maybe some of the most expensive ones?
Yeah, we did look at the Savas program, as I mentioned last time. That was not one that we felt lived up to the intention of the standards in terms of making sure that students were not just being given information and then being able to explore, but we're exploring first, working through a process, and then using that to help solidify their understanding. Smithsonian is one that we did look at. It was very similar to the other two that we ended up piloting, Great Minds, PhD, and Twig. It was not one that the team looked at to consider piloting.
Had you costed that out at all since it was somewhat similar to those two?
The costs seem to be very similar between that program and the others. Twig was more expensive, but the cost difference between Smithsonian and PhD did not seem to be different.
I just have to say, I feel like this decision is being rushed and there's more that should be looked at here. I'm disappointed that we didn't have some other options on the table and that I feel like maybe we're about to spend $1 million some. I'm not suggesting the program's bad. I'm just suggesting it feels rushed.
And it's been a 3-year process, so I don't think the process was rushed. As Mr. Ramirski said, we're asking for approval tonight so we can use this year's money that was left over to purchase the sixth grade piece and to make sure that we have training in place and the materials to start next school year. But certainly the process of getting to this point was a long process.
Mr. Hoffman, I'm sorry. If the reason is simply so that we can use residual budget funds from this year, how does approving tonight versus approving at any of the June meetings preclude us from doing that?
We need to make sure that we receive the items by June 30th. And so in contact with the company, as long as I place the order by June 1st, they guarantee that we will receive the items by June 30th. After June 1st, they can't guarantee that that would be the case, which means that I can't use this year's funds for them.
But it's still the same amount of money. It can still be, it's not as if those budget dollars vanish at the end of the fiscal year. They roll back into the general fund. That's simply an accounting device. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I'm not certain that it actually works that way and that money is somehow gone if we don't vote on this evening.
Mrs. Hall can
No,
talk
it's-
to that.
It's not gone. It's just not allocated to curriculum per se.
I'm sorry. what
I said
was
it's not gone. It is rolled into the general fund, not into the curriculum.
Right,
budget
and
for
then,
next
so we would that simply becomes a journal entry. So I don't know that I understand what your argument is, but I'm not sure that from an accounting perspective, there's as much urgency as perhaps we're intimating.
From what I'm hearing, though, that's just one small part of it. The idea that those funds are being used and carried over, that was just one small part. The whole process, going 3 years, presenting at multiple meetings, having teachers involved in piloting, having students involved in piloting, that is even the bigger picture. So to me, that's just a small thing, and I'm wondering why that's the thing.
I was simply responding to that part of the
Okay.
argument.
I'm
Making
just saying it was a
comment, I-
very
Yep.
small part of the decision-making, I think.
Yeah, in terms of, I mean, if there's an accounting process for that money to still be available in terms of getting materials for sixth grade, they do not, I guess, need to be done now, but it is important that we make sure that we have professional development set up. I can't secure those dates with companies until I have approval from the board that we're moving forward with those programs. And I need to make sure that the materials are here for the start of the school year. So the further we go with that, the less chance there is of that happening.
Yeah, if we wait too long for the professional development teachers, because they do have off-make plans, and then they may not be available, then you're gonna have, instead of maybe a fewer, a smaller group of teachers that have never seen this, a lot that will get very quick in service the first day of school, basically.
Right.
or the first.
And I know typically when teachers would want training to happen, and so I have dates that I'm ready to share with the companies. But the reality is that without an agreement, I can't secure them, and then therefore their trainers may become busy on those dates, which means that I can't get them here.
I would say we're also at a point, I don't want to say a point of no return, but we're at a point where we're down to basically these two companies. We do not have the time over the summer at this late date to write our own curriculum, get that in place, look at another company, pilot it, see if it actually works. We're at a, like, that was all over the last 3 years, as you said. That was the time to address those issues. And we have to have something in place this fall to meet the standards. And so I think you've done your due diligence. The education committee has done theirs. This is what you're presenting to us. It's time to move on it.
I would just suggest that even though your timeline didn't feel compressed, it did to me. And it did to us because we were brought what you had decided to work on behind the scenes. And that only happened recently. The second thing is, at the last meeting, I had requested that you go back to the company, someone go back to the company. I think you were planning to do that, Mr. Hoffman, if I recall, and you were going to check with them on a final price. Do we have a final price in here? Because I didn't see it. It might be buried in here somewhere, but did you do that? What was the outcome and who did you talk to?
I did. That's in the revised PowerPoint presentation. So I went back to Twig, expressed the concerns, and then they came back with the revised price that is in there. Essentially, what they did is they took the cost from EHD and went down to that,
But it did not include training.
but it did not include training, correct?
Did you go back to PhD as well?
I did, and their price is as low as it can possibly go. The comment from the sales rep was that they gave us their absolute best price to begin with, so we had the absolute best price to bring to the school board.
And I also appreciated, I don't know if it was Doug or you who got the additional information from school districts who have used this, because that was nice to review, because I saw some of the very same pros and cons that our teachers and our administrators saw. So it made me even more comfortable with the decision because it was the exact same kind of feedback.
Correct. Dr. Dandridge was the one that contacted those districts, and you're right, the feedback was very much in line with what our teachers shared.
Mr. Hoffman, thank you for the work that you've done with the teachers and the principals, and I really appreciate that. I don't think any of it was behind the scenes at all. I mean, a lot of the work that you do, in fact, most of the work that you do, you bring us results of the process. That's what I'm looking for. And if we didn't trust you and the staff to do that, we'd be looking at some other types of changes. However, that is not the case at all. I think we're at the point where we should be able to vote on this. I'm prepared to vote for option 2 100% and to say, I think you've done a good job and you've brought information to us that we've asked for. And I'm totally 100% behind what the teachers and what you have said, and Dr. Dandridge with option 2. So I'm ready to vote whenever everybody has had their chance to also have a say.
Any other questions? Okay, there is a motion. There's no other questions in a second. So all those in favor of option 2? Okay, opposed? I believe it was 8-1, motion carries. Thank you. And at this point, thank you, Mr. Maris, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman.
All right, so we'll dig into buildings and grounds. First, we have a project update from Mrs. James for ongoing projects.
Good evening. I just wanted to bring you up to date and just update you on a few of the projects. So this summer, as you all know, we have three main projects going on. We have the roof coating on LPC and LMS. Those also, we have the paving project being done, and we have the fuel tank, the fuel station project being done. All of those projects have been approved, contracts have been approved, they've been voted on, they've been signed. So we are set. All of the companies are scheduled to begin work on June 9th. So everything is a go on all of that. We don't have KCBA or ELA at this meeting this evening because we are going to be meeting with the township tomorrow, as a matter of fact. That will be KCBA, ELA, administrators, and we will be meeting with them to discuss the high school project, the renovation project, the expansion of the high school, and what is involved as far as the stormwater management, pervious surfaces, that sort of thing. And it will also include the beginning of how that project will start in moving the baseball field and the renovations with that, discussions on that, and bringing the township up to date on all of that.
Is this to get the necessary permits?
This will be a step in that, yes.
Will that be officially voted on in like a township meeting? How that'll work?
I
don't think it gets voted on, but that's way down the road.
Yeah,
This is,
yeah.
Okay.
this is just conversation to kind of outline the scope of the project. And as we start to get feedback from the township on some of those next steps that we need to make sure we've completed, they
So
get.
there's
the
no
necessary
surprises,
information.
basically.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah. There's a lot of conversation that has to happen regarding the expansion and what impervious surfaces that are going to occur from that, and what we need to do as part of the project to accommodate stormwater management and that sort of thing.
Any questions for Mrs. James? All right. Next item is Mrs. Hall will provide information on the partnership between Hempfield School District and the Mountville Youth Athletic Association.
Actually, I will do it that way.
Oh, okay. It said.
Yep, you're right. This is all there on the agenda. So, as you know, we have a partnership agreement with the Hempfield Youth Athletic Association as well as the Hempfield Rec Center. And the goal of those partnerships was to try and find ways to keep promoting our youth getting involved in things outside of the classroom. And part of those partnership agreements is because of use of space and taking care of that space within the district. And at Mountville Elementary, there are 2 baseball fields that the Mountville Youth Athletic Association has been using for a number of years. But they recently had a change in leadership within their athletic association. So we've been meeting, engaging in conversations, so we have something documented, because there hasn't been anything documented prior, just like we did with HYA and rec. And so the agreement that you see, they are in support of, and this allows them to not only use the fields, but they are taking care of those fields. They are providing the necessary costs and dollars to maintain them, to ensure that when there are games going on, the proper facilities are there for individuals, as well as engaging with a turf management company for any of the work that would need to be done, particularly around anything with pesticides or spraying. The youth association cannot do that. They have to have licensed individuals do that, and they must then connect with Mrs. James and her team. So we've outlined everything, and a lot of it pretty much mirrors the HYA. And if all goes well, that we're seeing the great numbers that are coming with HYA and the rec events, and we'll hopefully see the same for Mountville Youth Athletic Association, which will ultimately drive students as they get older to our district athletic teams. Any questions?
Are there any other youth associations? Just because this one came up a little bit after HYA, or are those the two major ones?
They're the major ones. There are other groups that host different things, different sports teams, et cetera, but not at the level of maintaining those fields and providing the dollars to do that.
My only other question was, and I think you addressed it, but I just wanted to be clear with the pesticide management that
Yep.
prior to the application of those, they would
They have to
coordinate
contact, yeah.
timing so that our kids aren't out on those
Correct.
fields.
No, and there's also notification that has to occur, working with Mrs. James and her team, documentation that occurs once it's applied and
Okay.
temperature and wind and all of that. So, yep.
Thank you.
I have a question about the scheduling. They will handle all of the scheduling of those fields?
They do, they run it through our system from the reservation side so that we know when they're using them. And that things don't get overbooked from other outside events. We have first right to them. After that, it's the Mountville Youth Association. And then after that, it would be anyone else to be able to rent the facility.
Thank you.
Just a couple of technical questions here. So these fields are on our property.
Correct.
So why, and we're gonna mow them, but they're gonna take care of the pesticide application.
And also any enhancements to the fields, backstops, benches, additional Dynatext, any laser leveling that has to happen to make sure the field's in good condition. So they maintain them on a regular basis. Yeah.
Is that the same as we do like for all the fields?
That is what we do with all of the fields that HYA uses
Okay.
as well.
So other than the ones that were used by our own varsity
Correct.
teams. Okay.
We maintain our fields that our teams use. These are fields that our teams are not using, that the youth groups use.
Gotcha.
And so they maintain them. And they have to give annual reports to Mrs. James. If they see damage and things, they connect with her. If they need to make a change or there's an issue with a bench or a backstop, they connect with her first before the work is done.
Yeah, and just before we sign this, there's a couple of verbiage things that.
This is the first, it'll be back in June for approval. So if there's
So
something you see, just let
there-
me know.
Yeah. Just some picky grammatical things.
That's okay. Just let me know. That's all I have for that.
All right. Next item is LPC and CMS stage renovations.
Yep.
Mr. Graham's going to lead us through that.
That is me.
Discussion.
So these are two capital projects that have been on the list from the feasibility study for a little while, or actually, I guess, a year or two ago. And we've been working on them for the last 6 months or so, and we'll get into why it took a little long to get something in front of you. But basically, we're looking at renovating the Sages in our oldest and most untouched buildings, which would be LPC and CMS, to improve the safety in both of those locations, as well as improving some functionality or restoring functionality in some cases at LPC. Throughout this whole project, we worked with 4 different AV integrators. You're only going to see quotes from 2 of them, but we worked with Stray Illuminated Integrations, Production Express, and Sage Technologies. Throughout the process, Production Express ended up dropping out, and Sage was bought out by another company and ended their AV integration business line. So unfortunately, we only had 2 to bring back to you, but they were competitive in the entire process. Worked very well, and we went through a number of revisions to get to where we are today with what I'm bringing to you. The first and simplest here is at LPC. We're really looking at kind of replacing everything that's there. The curtains on the stage, I'm sorry, I've got 2 slides in front of me here. The curtains on the stage are very close to the end of their lifespan for the fire rating. LPC's stage is very compressed compared to many of the other buildings. Everything is in very close proximity. So in addition to the curtains, we're also looking at replacing the lights. That goes for the dimming rack that's there that it's getting very difficult to find parts for, as well as getting rid of all of those high temperature incandescent lights that are hanging right next to all of the curtains, and trying to swap everything out to LEDs. And with that, the rigging that everything is hanging from is no longer really up to code. Needs to be reworked, and projection sound in there is barely functional for assemblies. And so again, part of the goal here was to get LPC back up to a place that's on par with the other elementaries in the building. So working through all of those requirements with the vendors, we came back with 2 quotes, one from Stray and one from Illuminated Integrations. The original budget for this was $150,000. Stray came back at 139, which is our recommendation to proceed with. It does address all of the concerns we had in the space, providing new equipment, new curtains, lighting on the stage. Illuminated took a slightly different route with the LEDs and added some controls for the gym. Even when you back that out, they were still a good bit higher than Stray was, and still over our budget. So again, we were pretty happy with the quote that came back in there from Stray and the full project scope, which if you want to look at it is in board docs. While LPC was very straightforward, CMS, on the other hand, definitely had some challenges for us. We're replacing much of the same gear, the curtains, the lights, the rigging, projecting. But CMS poses a few challenges to us because it's actually used as a classroom space as well as a performance space and an event space. So you have band, orchestra, and chorus that are in there. Orchestra in particular uses the entire back of the stage as a full classroom. The front of the stage is used for the middle school musical, plays, spelling bee, various other events that are held in there. Part of the difficulty with CMS is that when the building was renovated in 2005, any renovations or repairs or replacements of a gear in the auditorium was not elected as part of that building project. So most of the rigging, stage controls date back to an indeterminate period of time. Some of it looks to be as far back as the 60s and 70s when the building was constructed. So needless to say, a lot of that is very far out of code and design specs for what's in the space. And so we want to make sure everything is brought up to code, be as safe as possible given everything that's hanging in there. That said, when CMS's auditorium was built, it was really designed as a premier production and event space for the district. That is obviously not the case today. We have the Performing Arts Center. So one of the things that we looked at going through this process was we recognized we didn't need to spend the money to fully renovate the entire stage because the entire stage is not used anymore. If you go to a middle school play or musical, they really only use the first kind of 2/3 of the stage. The back half where the orchestra area is not touched. So when we talk about replacing the rigging, the stage lighting and everything like that, we actually downsized what was designed and in there. So we're talking about going from 7 electric lines to 5 and really converting the back half of the stage to just a plain classroom setup with LED lighting for the orchestra to use, curtains dividing it when there is a show. But we tried to take a look at how the space was actually being used today and really come up with a good design around all of that, addressing all of the safety concerns, addressing the lights, getting everything swapped out with LEDs. We also looked at, as we're replacing the rigging, what needs to actually go in there. Again, the middle school is not the Performing Arts Center. So if you're in the pack, you've ever been backstage, there's winches and pulleys and stuff can kind of come in and out. Productions at the middle school are a much simpler affair. Simply what we call dead hanging, all of the battens and electrics, which basically means they're locked into position. They can't move. They're just chained in place. That is a great cost saver because again, for most of these productions, we just need to hang a backdrop or something like that. And so try to look at how all of the stuff was going in there, how it was all going to be installed, any place we could save some costs to really right size the installation for the space. And again, since all of the electric and everything's being swapped out of there, stage lighting has really moved away from incandescent lights. Everything is LED now. So we had to go through and look at what was going to be required to put in LED lighting, theatrical lighting there on the stage, as well as back in the classroom area. So we had 2 quotes from that, one from Stray and one from Illuminated Integrations again. Both addressed everything we were looking for. We brought all 4 vendors in initially, kind of shared our vision for what we wanted the space to be, what we wanted some of the changes to be. I think the initial estimates or drafts or proposals came in somewhere in the $700,000 to $900,000 range. And we went back and worked with them, I think, through 5 or 6 revisions to get down to close to the original budget of $200,000. as we possibly could. And so where we ended up with, we got two very close numbers. Illuminated is a little bit lower and does address all of the major concerns there, all of the where we want to go with safety, with the rigging, with the curtains, and LED stage lighting in there. Before I go on to talk about the house lights in the next section, which is more of a discussion item, any questions on this piece or the LED piece?
I have a question.
Yeah.
A lot, I get this from my other board members. If we would go with Stray, since they would be doing both, has there been talk of any savings by going with them doing both?
Not
CMS and
Not in
LP?
this case. There's actually, the illuminated number actually has a, I forget the amount that's in there. Knowing the timeline for some installs, they actually were saving some money with that installation being pushed back a little bit. I think after the start of school was one option there, which we didn't think they would be able to get in this short of notice anyway with when it would get approved. I can go back and ask. I don't think
Just
there's
because of the
significant
timing?
savings there. The savings that you would see is actually what's coming up in the next part when we talk about some of the electrical engineering with the house lights.
I have a question about, because it is still used for performances for our middle school, I assume the staff that does those performances was involved
Mhm.
and they're not being shortchanged in any way?
No, we spoke with the director, the folks in my department that do all of the
Mhm.
technical setup. Again, performance at a middle school is very different than dance theater or something
Oh,
at the high
yeah.
school. A lot of the lighting and everything, it's my team that goes in and does hang everything. They're, with this setup, they'd be going in with a lift and hanging, which really isn't any different than what they're doing today.
Okay.
Because again, the important thing to remember here is, again, with the age of some of the equipment in there, we're no longer raising and lowering a lot of the electrics and the batteries and stuff. So it really functionally doesn't change anything of what they're doing in the space. They'll still be able to do all of the musicals. They'll still be able to do everything that they're doing today.
Okay. And I do, having been to many middle school performances as well as high school, there's definitely a difference. I just wanted to ensure that they're still getting the quality, even though all of this is changing. And then the safety issues that you addressed in the report as well are all totally taken care of.
Mhm.
We're not gonna, unless it's some kind of weird quirky accident,
Correct.
we should not expect anything.
This addresses all of our concerns with the space and gets them to a good spot for everything going forward.
Good. All right, thank you.
Yep. So one of the challenges or the reason this took 6 months to come back to you, at CMS, like any old building, when you start looking at replacing or tearing apart one system, things tend to unravel and you start having to look at other systems that are in the space. And the auditorium house lights, which are the 55 bulbs that are up in the ceiling that light the audience area, are all quartz halogen lights that are tied into the same dimming system that controls the stage. It's not uncommon, it's not anything surprising, but when you look at swapping out the stage lights with LEDs don't use the same dimming system that incandescents do. And because they're linked, that means that to just replace the stage, we have to blow up the entire dimming system, put in a system just for LEDs, and then put in something else to be able to control the lights in the house. And so as we work through this, there's obviously a lot of electrical engineering, and we had numerous electricians come in from all different parties and take a look at things. But as we were talking to them, they said, you really ought to think about, since again, there's going to be a ton of electrical work happening here, this is a good time to consider swapping out the house lights for LEDs. They'll be replacing LEDs on the stage. The house lights, like I mentioned, are quartz halogens. They're not incandescent, but they are very high wattage bulbs. You can't really get up and change them very easily with the way the ceiling is in the auditorium. You have to get a articulating lift, and it's not something that happens regularly. And then, like I said, they're currently linked with the dimmer system there. So we did get add-on quotes from Stray and Illuminate Innovations for replacing the house lights as well. And to your point about doing jobs together and getting some cost savings, that's what both of this represents is if you're going to be paid to have the electrician in, that labor and everything goes into both projects, you see some savings there. The Illuminate integrations have some different control options, which is one reason they're a little bit higher, but there's some different options there for LED fixtures and or either new fixtures or retrofit bulbs in the old fixture. We were unable to determine the age of the fixtures in the auditorium. There was no way to get to them either safely from above or from below in a lift. We don't have one that can get up there right now. So they could be from 2000s, they could be as old as the 70s, 80s, somewhere around there. So I just want to be clear too, as we're talking about the payback on the auditorium lights, this isn't a project we originally intended to do, and I'm not bringing it as a we must do this. This is simply an option for you to consider since we do need to do electrical work in there with the rest of the space. So as always, I know the question comes back, what is the payback for switching to LEDs? I did do some calculations up there. The existing incandescents are in the column on the left. Swapping out with the price from Stray for their LEDs is on the right. You can see somewhere around year 25, it is the break-even point. There are costs of bulb replacement, or there are no costs of bulb replacements in there. The labor, the lift rental is not calculated in there. And we also don't know when the existing fixtures may eventually need to be replaced either. I don't have that information. It probably wouldn't change the payback significantly, other than obviously if the fixtures have to get completely replaced. But needless to say, probably in the next 25 years, we'll be looking at replacing those fixtures. I don't know when that will be. I may be retired by that point. Who knows? That said, it will probably never be cheaper to replace those house lights now than if you do it at a later date, simply because the electricians are already going to be here doing the other work. So as I mentioned, this was an option, an add-on for both quotes to address the house lights at the same time. It's not critical for any reason, but if you want to be a little more looking forward thinking with the facilities, it is an option that's there to replace the lights. The calculations do change a bit. Stray does see some savings and comes in just barely under Illuminated if you wanted to replace the house lights. So with that said, I'll take any questions. Just to go back, the LPC number, since it was under budget, if there are not any concerns with LPC, we would proceed with that since that was already on the capital plan. CMS, it was over the dollar amount that was originally in the plan, even though not by much. Was not expecting any votes on the CMS piece tonight. It was more to get some feedback from all of you on both the lighting and the number. If you're good with the base number or whatever option, we would look at a June approval for that. If you're good with proceeding. So with that said, any thoughts from anyone?
So your payback calculations, what are those bottom line numbers there represent, the 67 and so?
60, so the 66,000 on the left is $2,662 per year times 25 years.
Okay.
And on the other side is $319 per year times 25 years, plus the initial investment in the lights. Sorry, that number's not shown up there, but that's basically how you get to the payback there. Or where that break-even point is.
And is there any government type things on that?
Not that was shared with me. If there was, it's probably already baked in there, but I could ask. I doubt there's anything at this point. But
25 years is a pretty lousy payback, though.
if you were building new, it's a no-brainer. Like I said, the theatrical side, they're basically not making incandescent lights anymore. When you're talking about retrofitting an old building, then yeah, it's a lot tougher.
This is all very helpful, Mr. Graham, and I support what you're suggesting. If we're going to do it right and get it done. My only question is, this seems like an expensive cost simply to retrofit 50 lights. I mean, it's because you don't have to rewire them, right? Like the new lights generally work with the old wiring, they just draw less current.
The wiring in the walls to some extent, yes. But the entire dimmer system that controls it is completely different with LEDs.
Okay, so if you have this information, how much of this is the cost of the new fixtures, the installation cost of the new fixtures, and then the control system? Because I just look at this and it seems very expensive. Simply, we retrofitted all the old lights in one of the restaurants a couple years ago, and there were probably 20 of them, and it cost $1,000 or $2,000.
Yeah.
So now there was not the control system.
If you
but-
dig into and I don't have that here, I can pull it up, but if you dig into the proposals, it is broken down in there. Labor is a huge piece in here. You're paying multiple electricians. These projects also qualify for prevailing wage. So you are paying prevailing wage rates for an electrician or multiple electricians. As I mentioned, the dimmer system or the replacement dimmer systems in here. Illuminated's was a little bit higher because they were doing some different things with DMX control, which means you can hook it up to a light board compared to just some presets that Stray was offering. So there's some slightly different things in there, but if you wanted more of a breakdown, I can put that together. Like I said, the details are in the proposals, but I can.
I'm just curious.
It's in there on the financial slide on slide 20 of 21 for the Stray. It's $96,000 for labor. $96,000 for labor for Stray.
96,000.
96,000.
That includes everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. And then the other one is also in there for illuminated, and that's just for the CMS one. And that is.
By putting any of these projects together, does that bump it over the prevailing wage?
Oh,
number?
it was already over prevailing wage a long time ago.
Okay.
Prevailing wage is built into all this.
Yeah, so there's no way to like do one this year and one next year.
No, yeah, it wouldn't matter. I forget, what is the threshold for prevailing wage? It's 20 something. We were way over that a long time ago, yeah.
Where you had suggested or mentioned that by splitting them, you'd quote, have to blow up the control or the dimming system. The cost of that and separating them is built into the original
Yeah.
Stray number. So that's already taking
Yep.
into account if we didn't fix the house lights, they'd all
Correct.
be. okay.
Yeah, yeah, if you don't do anything with the house lights, the original proposals all take into account maintaining the existing house lights and changes to the electric work that have to be done to maintain it. So nothing breaks or goes away if you don't elect to do the house lights.
And are there any of those, 50 roundabout light fixtures that aren't working right now, or are they all functioning?
I mean, there are certainly some dead spots where the bulbs haven't been replaced. They work, okay. Okay. So
I'm sorry.
at this point, they're all
I
good.
did not hear. Did I need to hear what you just said, or is it okay?
Mrs. Brady asked the question, are there house lights that are not working? And I said that they were worked on just before the last production. So I don't know if there's any out since then, but they were worked on before the last production and working.
Thank you.
And you probably have to follow up with illuminated because theirs was all integrated on their quote.
Yeah. Yeah, if there is serious interest in doing the house lights, I can bring back a more detailed explanation, presentation, something like that. Break things down if you have more specific questions.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, because you're not a little fuzzy on things. So you're gonna fix all the stage with the LED, and that will require a new electrical board?
Yes,
And then if we do the house lights, there's gonna be some rewiring, probably. Don't really know yet till you get somebody up there to really look at it. And then that actually should be, because there's two different systems, be done at the same time when you do the LED board? for the first, for the stage?
If you do them
Is
at the
that-
same time,
Mhm.
you're basically, you're not spending labor doing two different projects at different times. The electrician's doing all the work at the same time. You're not
Okay,
putting in one system for LED and one system for incandescent. You're able to share some
the
components.
whole system at the same time. So even though it's a cost thing, we save money in some ways by doing it at the same time because we're gonna have to do it again later anyway, correct?
You do. I couldn't calculate what that would be because I don't know
Sure.
what.
We don't know what the
prevailing
wages will be in
10
that
years.
time. Mhm.
Choose to change the fixtures in
Mhm.
10 years from now. So
Is most of the cost labor?
the what?
Is most of the cost labor for these lights?
It's not all of it, but I mean, it's not insignificant.
50%, 30%?
It's about a third.
30.
Third?
Yeah.
Okay, so most of the cost is the actual hardware. Is there a
About
chance?
$203,000 if my math is right. Is my math right?
300.
On the illuminated one, probably, yeah,
That's $300.
somewhere around there.
So this particular project was not in the current capital plan, but
Correct.
the Landisville School.
The house lights were not, like I said, when we
The
started,
house work, but the stage all was.
the stage was, and that's,
Okay.
that been 20,000 over. And that addresses all the concerns in the space.
Mhm.
It's just when we were going through and designing that, this was brought up by the electricians as something you should consider looking at if we're coming in to do all this other work.
So
Mary,
to
your
make sure I
thoughts?
understand what you're saying. There's basically two asks here. One, to go slightly over budget on the stage renovations. And second, whether the board wishes to also do the house lights.
That would be
So
correct.
in terms of and request in excess of budget, it's really only the excess for the stage plus potentially the LEDs. For the house lights.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys, you need to provide me with some input. Do you want to address the house lights? If not, that's fine. Then we just have to deal with the stage and everything on it, which again was, I think, 20 over versus LTC, which was 10 under or something like that. So.
Just a quick question, a couple questions. Number one, how often, just curiosity, how often do the house light bulbs have to be replaced?
Every couple of years.
I would say, I don't remember the last time they were replaced, so it's been a while.
There you have it. Okay. Other question. I'm not saying no, I'm not downplaying the need. Just trying to wrap my head around it. I mean, obviously, we're talking about things like rigging and curtains and stuff like that for the stage. I get it, right? There's a need there. There's a legitimate need. So on a scale of 1 to 10, yeah, it's got to be fixed. On that same scale of 1 to 10, when we talk about house lights, is this something that was stumbled upon and we're like, hey, good idea to bring somebody in if we already have people in to fix this and retrofit it? Or is there an actual need of like the same at the same level that the need exists for the stage?
No, it is not a need at the same level.
Okay.
It's not.
Okay.
It's a good idea while you have the electricians in, if you're
Okay.
willing to spend the money. It is not a
Okay.
urgent, critical.
So fire hazards, wiring is
Nope.
outdated, things like that. We don't have to worry about those kinds of things. This is just a nice to have, not a need to have at the
It's-
moment.
I would say there's probably, James, you could agree or disagree, there's probably a decent chance in the next 20 years, we'll have to address them in some way.
Oh, absolutely.
But
Yeah.
is that today? Is that tomorrow? Is it in 5 years? Probably not.
Understood. Okay.
Any
Thank you.
issues with getting the existing bulbs? Any issue? Are they incandescent?
I'm sorry, what was the
The
question?
bulbs that we have to get for the existing system,
They're-
are they incandescent?
No, they're,
It-
sorry,
I'm
I think I had.
Did you say they were eligible?
They're quartz halogen, yes, we can still buy them. They're not.
So there's no concern that we'll
No.
not be able to
There
get
isn't.
them?
There has not been at this point, no.
Are they the ones that hum when you run them?
Not these.
No, I think they get real hot, I
Those are
believe.
the stadium lights.
Okay.
And I'm guessing that there's really not that much cost savings for the electricians being there because this is a big project. It's not like, we're not talking $10,000-$20,000 savings. We're probably talking very minimal.
I mean, the other thing too, if you don't do it and we split the lights down the road, they've already been split, so it's easier to retrofit them down the road as well, if that would happen.
Is there a possibility, I know LED lighting has dropped in pricing significantly over the last 10 years. Could it drop some more? So the bulb price, because that's what, 2/3 of the cost of this? Chance that they could come down? You said labor was a third, right? Is that for,
Something
how
like
much
that.
is it for just the lights? Labor versus bulbs and hardware?
Just the bulbs, I'd have.
Yeah,
to-
this,
I'd
this
have-
60, just the payback thing with just the auditorium house lights, are they, how much is labor and how much is, parts?
It's about a,
Yeah, I was gonna, you mean to change out the bulbs right now?
Yeah, what you're proposing to do here while the electricians are here? What portion of that cost is gonna be labor and what
it's
portion is?
it's about a
bulb?
third labor, I think.
Third labor? So there's a chance that LED bulbs could get cheaper in the next couple of years? The labor go up, but the majority of it's hardware, right?
Is anything gonna go down?
Heck, yeah.
I guess, I mean, and I don't want to.
I don't know about you, but TVs have gone down a
We're
lot.
already kind of down in the weeds on this. I actually like the idea of replacing them. But Mr. Graham said something that got me thinking. We're already in the prevailing wage, but that's because of how big the stage job is. If we were to do these separately, could the auditorium lights be done as a separate project? Relatively low dollar, maybe not, which doesn't sound like this is something where you need a big stage production company. Any electrician can go in. Do we still have an electrician on staff or not? Is there a reason that our electrician can't swap those bulbs out?
It's not the bulbs, it's the
Well,
system, isn't it?
so
No,
today, yes, because the dimmer system is all tied
Yeah.
together. Once that's destroyed and out of there, it arguably becomes a bit easier.
It just becomes more, it's very time consuming, very time consuming.
I get that, but is it $71,000 worth of time consuming? I mean, in other words, we can pay our electrician overtime and they can do this a few at a time over the course of a few weeks if the
No.
control system is in place.
No.
You'd be doing the whole space.
You have to do the whole space at one time. You'd have to replace them all at one time. Couldn't do just a few.
Now,
But you could do it.
I'm supportive of the idea. I'm just not sure that this is the most cost-effective way to do it.
And I don't disagree that if we were to wait, I'm not having talked to the folks myself, I don't disagree that waiting may bring this, that just changing out the house lights may bring this down under what we have to require, we're required for prevailing wage.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And at that point, if we're using our own staff, there's no prevailing wage issue at all.
Well, that's correct.
Yeah,
Yes,
I mean-
yes. I just don't, because of the length of time and we have one electrician and it would have to be done all at the same time. I don't know that is in the realm of that one electrician to do.
Unless you did it over the summer?
Right, but that electrician has other things, other projects that we save to the summer that he can only do.
You don't have
over the
any
summer.
other individuals could assist that electrician? We just have one electrician?
We do only have one electrician, yes.
Okay.
Do I have others that could assist? Possibly. But there's a lot of projects that we save for the summer that can only be done over the summer.
I'm going to make a recommendation that with this many questions around the lighting project and the fact that there's not an immediate need or any safety and security issues, and based on the budget situation, even though it seems like small dollars, that we table that lighting project for another time, and then you can work out all these details, whether it's your staff or somebody else or prevailing wage at a different time. I don't think we need to make that part of this decision, and it's also over budget. We haven't even talked about where those funds would come from. And I think if we just table that part of it, that solves a lot of this discussion.
I would agree. I think now it's not a need. We can push it as project art for lighting and deal with that later with more information, more data.
But the stage part, I mean, I think they
have
do
to do
need a
that.
decision on the stage renovation part, right, Mr. Walker?
Yeah, that's correct. I think we're just talking about the additional lighting part of this project being pushed aside,
Yeah.
not the whole project.
So I think we're bringing back a revised capital plan next month. This would be on the June board meeting, just the auditorium part. We'll add that on there for approval, since it is over the original dollar, even though it's only a few thousand.
But I do think it does sound like there's interest in the other piece, but maybe bundling them might not be the most cost-effective strategy based on what Mrs. James is suggesting. So
Or the
I,
immediate.
for one, would be interested in hearing more thoughts on how we could maybe do that in-house with maybe support from a local contractor under the prevailing wage threshold.
I also think that, well, we've already said we're not
Yeah.
going to talk about it too much, but I don't think it needs to be soon. I think we can.
With regards to the stage stuff, I think it'd be the better option to go with one company than to split the two projects up with two different companies. Even though it's two different schools, just for ease of coordination and that type of thing.
I can ask. I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference at this point.
No, because you have two different prices for two different buildings. No, not the lights, the stages.
Yeah,
I think it'd be wiser just go with the one company for both of them than to split each building into two different.
I think that's what you're doing, right?
So.
no, our original, what are we gonna call it?
So LPC and then CMS, I think we should go with the one company for both.
Yeah, our original ask was essentially doing straight LPC and illuminated innovations at CMS from a pricing standpoint. I don't have concerns with either company. I don't think from a project management standpoint, both of them doing, or one company doing both projects is going to significantly help us. I mean, Strata's fantastic work. We've worked with them. I've seen illuminated innovations installations at other school districts. We actually went and visited a couple reference districts. They did fantastic work there. I'm not worried about either one.
No, but it's not easier to do one company for both? You don't think it's gonna make a difference?
And that's what I assumed, and that we would get, some kind of discount, but if you add them up, it's actually a $10,000 savings if you go with two different companies
Yeah,
because of the quotes that came in. So if we're already over budget by a little and then we can save 10,000, I trust you to decide,
I can go back and ask if they give us anything for doing both, but at this point, like I said, we've gone through and worked out, squeezed as many dollars out of it as we could.
Are they capable of doing both in
So-
the time span?
So Stray wouldn't give you,
That's what I was going to ask.
Stray wouldn't give you a discount if you gave them both projects.
I mean, we discussed it. There wasn't anything they really bundled in. And to your point, they couldn't do both projects at the same time anyway. So you'd be looking at the same period of time regardless of who was doing what.
If we
Take
approve this
too long.
at the June meeting, are we still able to get this done before the start of school, or what is the time frame for
Well,
this?
LPC doesn't really require anything. That was already approved. It's under budget. So we'll go
Okay.
ahead and start that. That would be done this summer. CMS, with the extent of it, I doubt that would be done. I know Illuminated was, again, there was a discount built in there for doing it a little bit later. I don't think, Straight didn't have that, but they also said they couldn't do both at the same time when we talked to them. So I don't think there's any chance CMS will be done by the start of school.
How will they, if they do that during the school year, what does that do for the orchestra?
We will have to work that out with CMS, with the staff at CMS.
Okay.
Yep.
So this has been a problem in the past, and I suspect hopefully it's gone away, but they can get all of the parts that they need for these projects.
Yeah.
Yeah. To be finished by the time kids come back. Okay.
Okay, ready to move on?
Mhm.
We have one more item, LMS and LPC paging system change order. Mr.
Yep.
Graham's going to review that.
That was a change order. The other project we had done earlier this year was replacing the paging systems at LMS and LPC. We had built in some contingency funds in there for broken speakers, whether it was in the building or outside of the building. I think we had estimated somewhere around 3 or 4 per building. The number, I think, ended up being almost double or triple that in terms of things that were not working, problems with wiring that had to be chased down. So that change order just addresses those additional repairs that came up or that needed to be addressed when the project was going on. The contingency credit is factored in there. You can see it, that basically wiped out all of the material costs, but there's still some labor that was involved in chasing all of that down.
Any questions for Mr. Graham on this? So the next item is an action on that change order. Do I have a motion to approve that item? 4A? The change?
So moved.
I have a second?
I'll second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor? No, I think it was unanimous. All right, let's take a 7-minute break. Come back for our finance meeting at 20 after.
So we're going to move in the portion of the committee meeting of the finance, and we're going to start with the budget discussion. Mrs. Hall has a presentation attached that is really essentially the same numbers that you've seen in the past. So there really is nothing new there, except the median assessed value went up slightly to the 199, I think, 2. I don't have it in front of me. 199, 2. Is that right? Yeah, I do have it right. But essentially, that doesn't change anything with the taxes. So at the end of the day, we can put the presentation up, but there's no reason to walk through this line by line since we've seen it multiple times and hopefully you had a chance to look at it before the meeting. So I think it's appropriate to move right into the discussion around the taxes for the district. And I really believe, even though I'm sure we have a little bit of time and could always schedule more meetings or whatever, we need to come away with a decision tonight or a consensus around, not a vote, but a consensus around where we want the taxes to be moving forward. And I know we were all over the place last time, so I'm just going to open it up for discussion. There's no vote on this tonight. And we can go from there.
I'm going to start with, I do have one question, just to make sure I understand this. In the state revenue column, we flat funded basically basic ed. But if I'm correct, we're showing an increase of about $434,000 in special ed.
Everything is flat funded.
The 25 budget's 4,557,000. The proposed budget's 4,000,009, almost $5 million.
So it's flat funded over what we received. So what we budgeted last year. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
flat funded over what we received. So what we budgeted last year was what we received the year prior. So it's always a year behind.
Okay.
That makes sense?
So that 499 is what we're getting
Exactly,
this year.
Right. So when we did
Okay.
last year's budget, we didn't know what we would actually receive.
Right.
For 24.
And we still don't know because,
Yeah, no, it's confusing.
and I'll continue on just with this. With the budget passing, at least in the House, I looked at the figures. We basically, Mr. Boberski had said that probably titles 2, 3, and 4 will be gone. We don't know that definitely, but that's about $305,000, which I was at a Title I presentation that Dr. Danbridge put on. In that Title I presentation, that extra money is helping to pay for 2.5 reading specialists and 4 paraprofessionals to help with that program. I guess my concern is if that money is gone, and also Mr. Boberski said the federal government's going to flatline the special education funding, which that also concerns me because they flatline the money going to the states, then we may not get any increases at all with it. So I guess we have to start thinking about that. We also have to start thinking about the future going there. I'm not sure, based on what's going on with the federal government, I wouldn't want to bet that we're even going to get the adequacy funding at this point, just because of what's going on with the federal budget. And again, the state's going to have to figure out how to make up the cuts in Medicaid with everything with that. So presuming the adequacy funding is going to be there, hopefully it is, but I wouldn't want to base.
So if, Mr. Donato, to
Yeah.
the extent that that is correct, why is it the responsibility of the Hempfield taxpayers to pay for federal program that the federal government decided not to no longer pay for?
Well,
Why don't we just, if that money goes away, then those programs need to sunset? I mean, it's
Well-
not the job of this board to step in and provide funds for federal programs that the federal government has decided to no longer fund.
But for all these programs I'm talking about, there's they won't fund them, but they won't get rid of the legal responsibility. The special education funding goes to the kids with the IEPs and things. We can't
But that's not what 2, 3, and 4 are they?
Mr.
Title,
No.
we're not talking about, titles 2, 3, and 4 are not special education funding. Are
They are not.
Yeah.
Title II focuses on, allows districts to use those dollars for things such as class size reductions, professional development, et cetera. We choose to roll those dollars up into Title I, so that we can maximize the students who need additional reading support. Title III is for English learners. And then Title IV is for other programming that there's a whole list of things that we can choose to do, or you can choose to roll it into Title I. Again, we choose to roll it into Title I to make sure we're serving our students with the basics of reading.
And I guess, Mr. Keener, with those things, when they're providing the reading specialists to do this, these are for kids that are not up to expectations with it. And again, research shows that if kids are not reading by third grade, the end of third grade on the appropriate grade level, they have a very difficult, they struggle for the rest of school. So I'd hate to see those things disappear. And then even if you think of the cost of what it costs for us, a regular education student versus a special education student, paying for these things, if we can, even if it keeps 1 or 2 or 3 kids from going into special education, it's going to pay for itself, because it's going to cost a lot more in the long run if a child's going in at second and third grade into special education and then stays in it till they graduate from school.
And just from experience being in Hempfield and a parent in Hempfield, our reading services in the elementary education realm do that. They provide that bridge that gets students where they need to be, students who do not qualify for an IEP, but have a lot of needs. And so it really does bridge that gap before it goes to, before they go on to middle school, before they go on to intermediate grades where they're really struggling. So to see that go, I think would impact Hempfield and Hempfield students and the Hempfield community in a large scale.
Right, and to be clear, Mrs. Esselman, I don't dispute that there is value in these services, but they are federal programs right now. It is not our job as a local government to bail out Congress. If Congress decides not to do something, it is not our job to step in and say, no, we're still gonna use local money and disproportionately impact Hempfield taxpayers to do something the federal government refused to do.
But we do have a responsibility to educate the students of Hempfield. That is our responsibility. And if the federal government isn't providing the funds for it, we still have to do it.
Yeah, I guess it's all perspective, right? I mean, Mr. Keener, it comes down to the question of how much do you value those programs, right? So essentially what they're doing is if that's the case, they're indirectly forcing your hand, our hand, right? Or those local governments' hands into making the decision as to what's best for that
Right.
specific district, right? So it's a perspective.
Yeah.
Right.
At some point, those programs were created by the federal government and funded by the federal government. Now the federal government is deciding they no longer wish to fund them, but now there seems to be, oh, well, we should keep the program anyway. It was a creature of the federal government, a creation of the federal government. If they decide they no longer wish to fund them, then that is a political decision that Congress and the president has made.
I just find that hard to say that then to the parents and the students who are receiving those services and benefit from those services. So I don't see it as making a decision to bail out the federal government, but I see it as continuing services that really help our students in our community. So, I mean, that would be my reasoning.
I'm just going to suggest that rather than get stuck on this issue, we look at the overall budget, the overall discussion around the tax increase related to this. I have made suggestions in the past, and those suggestions were related not to Title I, II, III, and IV. And I believe there is a way we can backfill the federal funding for this, because I think we all agree it's important, but it also is going to require this board to make other decisions related to items that I do not believe will fundamentally affect the outcomes. And that goes back to our class sizes of 5, 6, 7. A lot of classes that are running at well under 15. And at the end of the day, those are high school classes with independent kids, and most of them are AP classes or classes that we run every other year. There is an opportunity to find the funding, so we're not squabbling over funding that we should have, whether the federal government provides it or not, that is not going to fundamentally affect our outcomes in education. In fact, I would go as far as to say that we'll become better for all the changes that we could make related to that. And I know that's a bold statement and some of you are going to be laughing, but I mean, I deal with this in healthcare where we get a flat fee. Basically, and this is estimate, about 211 Medicaid dollars a day to care for somebody. It costs us about 500 plus. At the end of the day, none of our requirements have gone away, even though the federal funding and state funding has never been anywhere close to what we're required to do. If anything, they increase the expectations. And I can tell you, if done correctly, there are ways to buffer this without just throwing it out. But I do believe, just based on my experience in the healthcare world, there needs to be fundamental changes to how we're spending money in this district. And it doesn't need to come from areas that require, extra support for students that are struggling. It needs to come from areas such as AP classes with 5, 6, 7 students in them. It needs to come from a fundamental change at the high school level in how we're managing our class sizes and the offerings that we have. A smorgasbord does not mean that you don't get a good meal with a 2-page menu. You can get a good meal at both. You can get a good education with both. And our outcomes, unfortunately, whether we want to hear this or not, are not at the top of the charts. We've seen some numbers. So just the fact that we've offered all these things has not led to better outcomes. So I would just suggest we get back to looking at the budget as a whole. But if this board is unwilling to look at some of the areas where we can find funding, to your point, Mr. Keener, yeah, we wouldn't have to do this. I agree with you, but I don't think it's wise of us not to do it.
Right, and I agree with that as well, Mr. Walker. I would not want to see those supports go away. My point is simply a broader point about the separation of powers, the level of government, all of these things.
It's fair.
And
What you
frankly,
said is a fair
unfunded-
statement.
Unfunded mandates.
It's a fair statement. We deal with unfunded mandates every day in my world. I get it. So I guess if we want to go around, I would like us to go around and I want you to give your perspective on where you want to be with the taxes. If you're not ready to do that, you can take a pass on that. Mr. Donato, since you started us off, you can go ahead and we're just going to go around. I want you to explain where you want to be with the tax increase and the why behind it. And then maybe we can make some progress with this discussion.
Okay. Last time I said 4.8, I'm still staying at that. My reasons why is because of things I've mentioned. Also, the fact that we have to look at the future with this, and it's in the following years when you look at those tax things, if we're going to go lower than that, then you've got to be willing as a group to raise taxes later on to the maximum, even with changes, because the amount of our index goes down going on, and we're still basically borrowing for the next 5 years, almost 1.8% to pay for the high school going through that.
3 years after this year.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Donato?
No, that's it.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Mrs. Eshelman?
I said before that I was at 4.8. I think that gets us where we need to be. That balances our budget. Plus, again, the additional losses in other places. I don't want to see that snowball and continue to happen. I am also behind if a compromise can be made. I've talked about 4.5, but I've talked to the administration and asked questions about exactly what that 0.3% would look like. Like what would be cut, what would not be able to be done. And if I personally am behind that, I will gladly sit up here and say, because we could not go to 4.8, we got consensus to go to 4.5, and I will take responsibility for then what wouldn't be funded if that was agreeable by the majority of the board, because the decision does have to be made. So, but I would want publicly those items to be disclosed so that the community understands what not going to the Act 1 index would do in the meantime.
All right, Mr. Wagner.
So for me, and historically, I'm probably among the lowest at the table last few years of what the tax what the tax increase should look like. When I take a look at this, I'm probably somewhere in the middle of this year, right? Taking a look at what we have coming down in the future of the next few years, taking a look at what that index does look like, taking a look at the things that we know we have to pay for. For me, it's about striking the right balance, right? So, if there's folks here that are in the high threes or even at 4, I wonder, does that get us home? I'm not convinced that it does. I think that going too high, I think overburdens our taxpayers unnecessarily. And I think that there's a number of people at this table that have made comments, and I don't disagree with them, that we probably need to take a look at a lot of the things that we do within this district and probably make some changes. I don't think those changes are going to happen overnight. I don't think we're going to be sitting here in 30 weeks or 40 weeks or 52 weeks and saying, hey, we just made a change and it just fixed the problem to 7 figures. I think that's a 24, 36 month plan. I think that plan of action should probably be put into place today. However, I also know that we have to take a look at the tax increase today. So for that reason, I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I'm probably, and last meeting, I was right at 4. And that was also before I took into account the federal piece, which equals about 305. So if I were to take that into account, that puts me at 4.3. I'd be willing to settle a little bit lower than that at 4.2, 4.25 is probably where I comfortably sit. So I'll go 4.25 is where I comfortably sit. And I could wiggle either way, a tenth of a point, 2/10 of a point. We could figure that out on a $150 million plus budget or $158 million budget over the next, year or so. So for me, 4.25 is where I am today.
You said 4.4?
4.25 is where I am today.
4.25.
Oh, 4, I'm sorry.
Correct.
And Mrs. Eshelman, you said 4.8, right?
Or 4.5, knowing what exactly that would take away from our budget and being open and honest about that to the public and not relying on maybes in other places.
Thank you.
I'll keep mine brief. I'm going to come in a little bit lower than that, and I'm going to explain why briefly. I'm struggling to believe that this board has what the Lancaster County termed the chutzpah to make the adjustments that would take months, maybe 2 to 3 years to actually come to fruition, to get me to a place where I'd be comfortable continuing to tax. It sounds counterintuitive, but if we're not using taxpayer dollars wisely, which we've been entrusted to do, raising taxes to the max every year while we do not address some of the fundamental things that are glaring around what Hempfield offers. And I know this administration, just to clear the air, has done that to the best of their ability, but not had the full support of the board to really revisit and look at this with a fine-tooth comb and get smart about where the spending comes from. For that reason, I'm really at 3.8 at this point, but I could probably get up to 4, but and backfill that with some of our general fund reserves, knowing that there's a commitment to moving forward with a fundamental look at the high school specifically, and maybe the middle school, and the offerings that we have, and the fact that some of our class sizes are running it way under where they should be. And a lot of our classes that hold 30 are averaging about 16, 17, 18, 19 students. We are not efficient at all here at Hempfield, whether we believe that or not. The proof is in the pudding and the data doesn't lie. We need to be better with our spending, and raising it to the index every year will only cause this district fundamental issues financially well into the future when I'm long gone. So that needs to be looked at. I might be able to get to 4, but right now, I'll be honest with you, I'm about 3.8.
All right, I would say I'm at 3.8 right now. Some of my reasons: Hempfield has a very good fund balance, and even our unassigned fund balance of 11.4 million is very good. And you think you look at the other districts in the county, we're doing much better. I also think about, we're already taxing our taxpayers an additional 1.71, 1.8% for the high school building. So that additional money, we're already taxing them more than we normally would. So I think it's better to try to keep the rest of the money as low as possible. Also, historically, I don't know if you got this to look at Mrs. Hall's spreadsheet showing the over and under, and historically, I've always said we usually do better than planned. Also, I believe the 700,000 from the state I believe that we're going to get that. So even if we would come at budget, which we usually do better, we'd be talking, taking 4% of that unassigned fund balance was already 11.4 million, a few $100,000. I'm at 3.8. I could possibly go to 4, but right now I'm at 3.8.
Mrs. Johnston?
This is not a fun conversation to have in case, I know we've had many individual conversations over the last week, few days, hours even. I don't disagree with everything that's been said, and I know that the administration has plans to look in more depth about class offerings and what we're doing in the academic realm without compromising in any way the wonderful education that we provide here for our students. I believe we can do that. That said, we've made a commitment and we know we need to take care of our physical plants and our buildings, and we need a new high school. And renovations, we have to pay for that some way. When we say we raise our taxes every year, I'm not sure I totally agree with that statement, but this year, I actually think we should have been at 4% last year and over the last couple of years. So, and we wouldn't be having maybe this discussion. I said 4.8 last week. I think now, I don't like counting on any money that we don't already have a date of delivery at all. And we don't have that from the federal, from the federal or the state government. So I don't want to count on that. I think we always need to have a healthy spend reserve, and we also have to have a capital reserve. For that reason, for compromise sake, from 4.8, I would be willing to go 4.5, but no lower than 4.3. And I agree with Mrs. Eshelman, we need to know what hits the budget, the expenditures would be taking. And I also, any changes that we make, the fact of the matter is, any changes we want to make to any programs, they are not going to happen this year. You have to plan that out, just like Mr. Hoffman did for the science and for the ELA curriculum. It takes about a year, 18 months to make some of these changes. We can't just do it like that. So I know it's waffling, and I'm okay with that, 4.3 to 4.5.
Mr. Garber?
I think there's like two subjects that people are looking at is no matter what the taxes increase, what do we do with taxes? Either we cut programs or take out the fund balance. I think we're mixing those two up. So people are talking about where if we go like Ms. Johnson, Mrs. Eshman, that is we're cutting programs, right? We also have other people like Mr. Wogemuth and Mr. Maris that are talking about taking out the fund balance, right? So I think we are looking at it two different ways, and so that affects how we do our budget. Just want to point that out because no matter what tax increase, we have never said we're going to cut programs or cut people, right? So we have to have a balance between education and the taxing on the citizens. We can't drive everybody wants to say people move here for our school district. So we need to have a strong school district. But if we drive the people out because they can't afford to live here, we know that we get free lunches on every school because of our funding and our economic impact of our families. So I'm trying to strike a balance. So I am, at the end of the day, I think I'm around a 4. And it's about balance of good education and then keeping the impact on the community.
Mrs. Brady?
I started at 4.8. That is where I truly believe we should be. I am not opposed to finding something a little slightly lower if we can all agree on it. I am not in favor of pulling from the fund balance. I think that is important to keep those healthy reserves for various reasons. I'm also very concerned that if we do not raise to the maximum, as Mr. Donato said, the coming years, our ability to meet the budgetary needs comes with a much smaller Act One index in the coming years, and costs will only go up. And it looks like federal dollars will likely go away. I don't want to set a budget on hopes or wishes of what will go away, what won't go away, what will be mandated, what won't be mandated, what the state will give us, what the state won't give us. I think we need to go on what are certainties and be responsible in that way, because that is something we are tasked to do, is to be responsible in that sense as well and not make guesses. Mrs. Hall's presentations point to 4.8 is what we need to balance the budget without taking things from reserves and not counting on things that aren't promised. So that is why I feel like that's the best move. In contrast to other statements, we have not overtaxed every year. We haven't met that Act One index year after year. We've lost opportunities in the past to keep us from this position today, and it will only get worse in the years to come, which is why I don't think relying on taking from reserves is a good idea, because the coming years, we're not going to have the ability either, and we'll have to keep taking from the reserves. Somebody, I don't know if it was you, I think, that mentioned lunch, the free lunches. That could be going away too, and we're going to have to find a way to handle what's coming, what we won't be getting as far as funding for school lunches. That is also not a given, and money that will likely be going away. And we all know that kids that aren't fed don't do well in school. So we're going to have to find a way to meet that need. And above all, maybe not above all, but still at the top, we need to find a way to get full day kindergarten going in this district. And that doesn't come for free either. So that only raises expenses. It raises staff needs, it raises building needs, but it is a need that we have and is wanted by those in our district. And we know it's the right thing academically. So 4.8 is where I would prefer to be. I'm hearing that there isn't consensus for that number, enough consensus anyway, without a majority. I cannot see going any less than 4.5. I might get myself to that, but I truly believe 4.8 is where we need to be.
Mr. Keener.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. At the last meeting, I said I was between 3 and 3.5. That's where I still am. I would certainly be happy to go to 3.5 to find some consensus here. My biggest overriding concern is that no matter what number we choose, between 3 and 4.8, is I don't think we have done a good job of strategically addressing the cost drivers in this district. And yes, we can nibble around Title 2, 3, and 4. And yes, I think at the end of the day, everyone in this board will find that money, because I think we all believe in those programs. But we did not do a good job with the latest collective bargaining agreement. That's not intended as an exposure on any member of the negotiation team from either the union or the board. But at the end of the day, we landed with a CBA that literally no one is happy with, that the board is not happy with, that the faculty is not happy with, and we did nothing to address the strategic weaknesses in the CBA. We are also looking at a phenomenally expensive capital plan over the next 10 to 20 years for high school, several elementary schools, athletic fields, all of those sort of things. I think that we have probably not value engineered those projects to the degree that we should. And I haven't seen a willingness to aggressively examine the budgets for those projects in a way that will make a meaningful impact. I know the administration has done an excellent job nibbling around the edges. We've cut sort of the small amount of discretionary spending that we have. The administrators at all levels of the district have done a nice job with that. But we have not done anything to address the major strategic cost drivers. And until I hear a firm plan for doing that, or at least a willingness on the part of a majority of this board to make difficult strategic choices, the highest I'm going to go is 3.5.
Thank you, Mr. Keener. And I think you said that more eloquently than I did, but I stand very similar with my concerns around this board's willingness to look strategically at some of the tough decisions that we need to make and not just continue to rely on the backs of the taxpayers to fund our bills. And so with that being said, we are all over the place. I think we could probably debate this all night until 1 a.m. We don't vote on it tonight, but I think hearing what everybody had to say, we will be prepared, and somebody needs to be prepared to make a motion next time at the meeting, and then we'll move from there. But we definitely are all over the place. So I hope all of you can go home, give this some tough thought. And look, I'm willing to go to 4.8 if I have 100% confidence that we are spending those taxpayer dollars wisely. I don't have that confidence, and it's not the administration's fault. It's not anybody's fault in this board. This goes back to previous practices of just having every program and being everything to everyone. And I can assure you we're bleeding dollars there and lots of them. And it will not affect our outcomes educationally if done correctly with a strategic plan. So that being said, the board is a board of 9. And so, but we need to try to come to some consensus. So next time we come together, we'll have some motions, we'll have some votes, and we'll see where we land.
I feel like next time is too late because the budget has to be.
We don't vote on it tonight.
No, but we vote on the budget on next meeting. So if we don't have a current plan of what the budget's going to look like, how are we going to get a budget approved?
We don't have one tonight, and I don't think it's going to matter if we go around this room 10 times, Mr. Garber, or 20 times. We all have put our bit of our stake in the ground related to where we are.
In June, right?
So just to address Mr. Garber's question. So if a decision is not made and a budget approved at the June 10th meeting, and we have to go beyond that, we are going to then be late with tax bills, which means you are late in getting revenue, and most of our revenue from the local tax comes early. So if we are delayed in that process, we'll be delayed in getting the revenue coming in. So that's just.
So I guess what we're saying, we have to make the decision on June 10th.
In my thought process is we need to come away to this meeting tonight, knowing what the current tax increase, so that way we know what the vote is going to be for the budget.
Well, then who's willing to move? Because my ceiling's 4% right now. I think I heard Mr. Keener's ceiling at 3.5%. You hinted around 4%. Maybe 4 for Mr. Maris. That's 4 people. So Mr. Keener, Mr. Garber, myself, and Mr. Maris, yeah, he's not even willing to come up, so we're still short. So I guess, I don't know what consensus we plan to come to tonight, but there's even discrepancies between Mr. Wagner, Mrs. Eshelman, Mr. Donato, Mrs. Johnson, and Mrs. Brady. So does somebody want to put a number out there? Because I'm at 4% right now as the ceiling for me. If you want to start there.
I'll throw this out. I wrote down everyone's numbers when they threw them out. Just saying, I was at 4.25. The average of all 9 of us is 4.25. So take that.
So you would not come down to 4.0.
I didn't say that. All I said was that my number was 4.25.
Okay.
4.25. When I take a look at the 9 of us and you average out the 9 of us, the number magically is 4.25. So
Sorry,
that's okay.
We still can make this decision on the 10th, correct? June 10th?
That's when the final decision will be made. But if we can come up with some consensus tonight, again, I'll start it off by saying my ceiling is 4. I can't go any higher in good faith, knowing that these are taxpayer dollars we've been entrusted to, and we have a responsibility to use those wisely. And it will take some time to trim, but I'm willing to consider using a little bit of those savings during that period of time with a concerted strategic plan to look at how we manage our offerings. and our expectations around graduation. There's a lot of fingers to this whole thing.
But I think that those are the kind of things, as Mrs. Johnson said, will take a number of years to affect if we go down those paths. And we're not going to see the savings of those potential ideas for several years. We still need to meet the budget in the meantime as those kind of things are potentially worked through. And so setting a limit, assuming that will happen, isn't a realistic thing because they won't happen for a couple of years.
Somebody can throw out another number you want to work with. I can just tell you that my ceiling is 4. I'd rather not be there. I typically am used to incremental increases that are appropriate over time, but that also involves strategic look at expenses and our strategic plan around how we manage the taxpayer dollars we've been entrusted to use. And so if somebody wants to put another number out there for discussion that's different than that, I'm one of 9. So feel free, but my ceiling's 4.
I want to throw out something here that I mentioned briefly, but if you look at the last 10 years, only 2 of the 10 years did we have a deficit, and 8 of the 10 we had a surplus. Now, granted, a lot of this number is due to COVID. However, it's still money that was overpaid by the taxpayers, 15.7 million over 10 years. A big chunk of that's from COVID grants, but still, that was a surplus. So that's saying we wouldn't have had to tax the taxpayers as much as we did. That's a lot of money. And I'm thinking for 300,000 or 400,000, if we have to dig into that fund balance, I don't think it's a big deal. We've already taken a lot more from the taxpayers. Plus, we're already taxing the taxpayers an additional 1.8%.
That's our commitment to debt service for the high school. And I think that was something that, after hearing everyone talk, was not brought to the forefront as well. We have made a commitment, a public commitment at a community forum to fund our debt service to fund this high school. And that is a large chunk, 1.8% of that 4.8% Act 1 index. And although it is a total raise in taxes, I do see our commitment to the high school being something where we do need to raise taxes.
I don't disagree with you. I agree with that. I'm just saying we've already taxed the taxpayers additional 1.8.
I don't think.
Try to minimize the rest.
I think was your number 3.8%?
Yes.
I don't think that will get us to funding that debt service for the high school, as well as continuing other things that Hempfield is well known for, and without cutting. And again, I need this board to take responsibility when things have, and I've heard multiple board members say they appreciate what the administration has done to cut costs. And in all of the presentations I've seen those supply costs go down, large chunks of money go down. And although in words, we are saying thank you for making those cuts and getting us down, we are not then going, okay, you have done all of that work, and now we are going to support, and whether it go to the index or close to the index, for these large things that we have committed to. So to me, some of that stuff is words, and that bothers me. Like I said, I'm willing to take responsibility of things that may go by going down to 4.1 or using reserves if it's a small amount. I know I've spoken to a couple people about that, which I don't feel comfortable with, but if it is a small amount and we're not backing down from commitments we've made, I may be okay with that if I get the numbers from the administration, but I will take responsibility for that. I won't just say, I want lower taxes and not take responsibility for what that then does.
Mrs. Hall, could you, so our unassigned fund balance is almost 11.4 million. What are the rest of our fund balances? Could you summarize those and what our total fund balances are, capital reserve and all of them? Could you review that? Is that?
You can't,
Okay.
you need to give her a minute. You put her on the
Take a
spot.
minute while others are talking.
Mrs. Eshelman, I just wanted to clarify with you something I heard, and I just want to make sure I heard it clearly. You said, did I hear you say you'd go to 4.1 or did you mean 4.5?
No, at 4.5.
Okay.
I heard the same.
And I just.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm
think
sorry.
you
I have a
did.
little tickle in my throat.
I-
6.5.
4.5.
The
Yeah.
debt service for the 211 million is not just next year and 3 more, it's next year and 4 more years.
No.
It's for,
It is 4.
If I'm looking at the Act
Okay.
1 index,
4 more. And that wasn't discussed enough.
Wow.
coming here.
With an Act 1 index only going down.
The Act One index is meant to be a ceiling, and I can't help but believe last year that some around this table, and I won't call you out, wanted to go to 6.8% last year and another 4.8 this year. That's a total of over 11% in 2 years of taxes. I can't remember the last time any community has shouldered that responsibility on their backs. And that's where I keep coming back to, as a wealthy district in Hempfield, why are we struggling for funding? There's only one reason. It comes back to the spending and the strategic plan around that. And I'm not comfortable today in saying to anyone in the public that those tax dollars are being used as wisely as they can be. And again, that's not a dig on anybody. It's just a fact that when I look at this from an operations standpoint, I see a smorgasbord of opportunity.
It was 6.3, not 6.8. And had we gone to that level, maybe we wouldn't be having these very.
Still over 11%.
But my point, I just am reading off of the presentation. Then we wouldn't be grappling with something so close to the index this year. I mean, and again, for future planning.
So I look at a lot of things, right? I think not going the index gives us as a board a goal and pressure to look at our spending for the future and helps us hold us accountable, right? Because there's some pressure on us now. The second thing is the Act 1 index can change. There's a lot of things can change down the road. It can go up, it can go down. I suspect the Act 1 index is going to go up. And there's multiple reasons for that. But I think this helps keep the pressure on the board to make those tough choices. And I do feel like more of the people are in the lower end than the higher end. So I do agree that that's where we can get 5 votes.
Speaking of the going to the max, I got some information from Mrs. Hall, and this is just my estimation. So, after Mr. Donato talked about going to the max every year, I went back the last 9 years. I got some information from Mrs. Hall. Had we gone to the max in the last 9 years, our current millage would be about almost 21, which is almost 15% higher than our current tax rate. That is a significant impact on our taxpayers. And again, I agree with Mr. Garber. I think we have to manage just like we manage our own budgets and not just say, we're going to go to the max every year. That I believe that makes us just susceptible. Well, we'll just take whatever we can get and not try to cut costs.
I think using those past numbers is very hypothetical because it didn't happen. And so they weren't taxed on it. And so there were things that we didn't address. If 5 years ago or 7 years ago, we had actually done those things and actually started on the high school project, then we would have saved probably $100 million.
And it's funny you should say that. The amount of money we would have raised was only 11.8 million, which is very small with all the projects we're doing at the other schools in the high school. So it would have made a huge difference and it would got us in a higher tax bracket, moved us over compared to other districts. I don't think it's wise to go to the max index every year.
And we haven't, but there are years
We
that
haven't.
we have not. But there are years that, like this one, that I think we do need to. We haven't done it in the past and we have room to make up. And we have I'm going to say it again, the need to extend our programming for full day kindergarten.
So to say the statement over and over that we do not need to go to the Act 1 index every year is, I believe, putting out false information. Repeating that over and over, we have not. The boards have not.
Well, let me ask
I'm
you,
just-
Mrs. Eshelman, do you feel that the next couple of years, we're going to need to go to the max index?
I feel this year we need to go to 4.8 because that will balance our budget. And we hopefully will get other funds and hopefully other funds won't be cut to the extreme that we think they may. But I'm trying to plan ahead to put us in a good position, not a position where we're doing this every year. And I think the Hempfield community would support that. and want that. And I do think the administration has done a lot of cutting. And I know the community has felt that over the years. Some of our board members do not think it's enough, obviously, and they keep saying that, but I'm going to keep saying I think it has been happening a lot. So that is why I'm at 4.8% this year.
Mr. Keener, you got your
Thank you,
hand.
Ms. Walkman. Mrs. Esselman, first of all, hope is not a strategy. We can sit here and hope that we get all this extra funding all we want.
I do not hope. I wrote a resolution. I talked to our representatives. I am not in the business of hope, although I would love to be. I'm not. I'm in the business of
I'm-
actions, which again is my reasoning for the 4.8%.
Your words, not mine. With other funding out there, I hope we get it. We can hope that we get it. I don't want to get into semantics with you, but you're the one that said it. I'm just pointing out that hope is not a strategy.
Not to balance our budget. I want our budget balanced by this 4.8% or less, and then knowing what that does not get us.
And I also want to agree with a point that Mrs. Brady made. And while Mrs. Brady and I may have slightly different views on the overall budget structure, I absolutely agree that we should not be balancing the budget on the back of our reserve balance. The reserve balance is a savings account for unanticipated emergencies to cover us in the event that there is a state funding shortfall, some cataclysmic event. And it is the cornerstone, one of the two cornerstones of our AH2 bond rating. So I absolutely agree that balancing the budget off of reserves is not a good strategy.
And Grant, we only did that 2 out of 10 years, these past 10 years, and we have 15 million extra over those 10 years. So we definitely have not made that a strategy.
I don't want to get in the habit.
So I agree with you, Mr. Keener, but you came in at the lowest tax of anyone. So I'm assuming that means you're expecting, that it not be balanced with that, and you would have to do trimming, which is through strategic planning appropriate.
I would like to see this board take concrete, actionable steps to address the structural issues with the budget. And we have not done that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that's fair.
If we do that, I am happy to be flexible about the number that I said. Until that happens, I'm not willing to be flexible.
And that's where I've been.
So I guess we have to figure that out tonight then, right?
Well, we have 2 more weeks too.
No, I mean, like, I'm not trying to be funny, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if we want, I said it before, and I don't disagree, we do have to take a hard look at a number of things within the district. I think it's the prudent thing to do, right? I mean, and I think we've talked about that. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in the next 2 meetings. But for today, we've got to figure something, right? So if you stay at 3.5, that's fine. If that's your stance. And so the question is, what are we going to do right now to prove to you that what we need to be doing is going to be done to get you to where you need? So in other words, I'll go back to my initial statement. It's got to be done tonight. Am I right?
Yeah, I would
Good.
like, you asked a specific question, Mr. Wagner, I'll give you a specific answer. I would like to see the board and the administration begin a robust, long-term plan on how we can manage our debt service and how we can work with the faculty on a sustainable collective bargaining agreement that addresses the structural inefficiencies that I have been harping about for the last decade.
Well, so 2 things real quick. Go ahead, Mrs. Johnston.
On this board for 8 years, I realized that maybe I'm not as astute about a lot of things that you gentlemen are, but that's a bunch of junk. We have sat here, and I could use other words. I had to stop and think about the best words to use, but how are we supposed to do and what you're saying and still get our budget passed by June 10th? Do you have all I've heard were just broad stroke, we need to do this, we need to do that. We have too much in the high school. We've got plans for the high school.
No, we don't. We still have time.
Yes, we do, because I'm having a meeting in June with the Education Committee, and we're going to begin to specifically start to address some of those issues. What do you have in mind? What do you have in mind?
I have a couple comments, and I think we need to get back to the basics. We can go round about this for hours tonight, and we will be here till 1, 2, 3 in the morning if that's what you all desire. I think some of you feel like we need to come together with some number. I put out 4% tonight. Is there any willingness with a straw poll, as I call it, for some of you to come up and some of you to come down, as that feels like a spot that takes a tiny bit of risk around flat funding, but does not require any intentional fundamental changes this year to anything that we're doing without a strategic plan. And I've looked at these numbers and I feel like that's a spot where we can be okay. But some of you are much higher than that. Some of you are much lower than that. And I respect your position, but if we're going to come to some agreement, if 4 is not the number, we can start looking at some of you coming up, some of you coming down, then what is that number? Somebody throw something else out there and let's have a real discussion around where that number needs to be. We've all spent countless hours talking about it. We're all going to agree to disagree, and that's going to continue to happen as long as we sit here and argue about every little detail. We need to come up with something. It's not that I'm trying to push this, but I'm trying to move it along.
I don't disagree with you at all, but when we start talking about we got to do this first and we got to do this, we all know that's not going to happen.
I think we're looking
suggest-
for a commitment to that. And I realize that commitment is a loose commitment, Mrs. Johnston,
I'm
but
making-
that's something that I talked about before, and you've made that commitment. I think as a board, we need to commit to do what Mr. Keener said and do that. And you've made that commitment to take that on as a task force with your education committee. So we're holding you to that, and we expect that moving forward.
We will do that. I suggest 4.4. It's a compromise between 4 and 4.8.
Is there a straw poll of anybody that's interested in a 4.4?
Okay.
Mrs. Johnson put out a number. Is there anybody, is there at least maybe potentially a straw poll of 5 board members that could get there? I'm not there.
I would do it if, again, I knew, like Mr. Garber said, is it coming from the reserves or what is being cut? I need to know what happens and then I will agree to that. But it is going to come from somewhere right now at this point. So
We can't guarantee that until we have the funding that comes in.
We can't
No, we
guarantee it
have-
won't until the funding comes
We
in. so
have to have a
need know.
plan in place if that's the number that's set. If the funding doesn't come in, what is our
not-
plan? Is it reserves or is it cuts? I think we should decide.
We have a number on the table. Is there at least 5 people that would be interested in Mrs. Johnston's recommendation of 4.4%? It's
If
not
I-
a vote.
If I knew what amount was coming from the.
So I take that as a no, at least today. So I don't hear support for a
No,
4.4.
that's looking for confirmation so I can make the decision fully and be behind it and explain it to the public. That's
Nobody
looking
can
for transparency.
We're not in a position to confirm that.
I think we have to be in a position to say where how the budget will be adjusted and or where we're borrowing it from the reserves. If we're going
It
to
may
set
come
that.
from many different angles when we get the final numbers.
Well, I can't vote on it until I know. You all are asking for other things to be done in order to get your vote, and I can't vote on that until I know.
It's not about getting our vote. It's about a tax increase that's appropriate and wise use of taxpayer dollars that we've been entrusted with. If there's not enough support for the 4.4%, then we need to move off of that and move on to another number. I've thrown out 4. I didn't hear enough support for that.
I don't know that you don't.
Mr. Walker, move point
Yeah.
of order. May I suggest that that there is not a motion, but a suggestion of 4.4, that we simply do a show of hands. And if there aren't 5 board members, that we move on to another number.
Yeah, we can do a show of hands. It's not a vote, it's a straw poll. So those of you interested in a 4.4%, raise your hand.
With the information,
With
the back.
extra information.
So maybe 3. So that's not enough to move that forward. I'm going to go ahead and do the same for the 4.0. Anybody interested in a 4.0 as a compromise to everything we've talked about? There's not enough support for that. So somebody give us another number.
How about 4.25? See if we have any hands for right in the middle at 4.25.
4.25. Sounds like an auction.
Only one.
Come on, someone come. I mean, I feel like Jerry Maguire here.
It was just
Let's-
Mr. Wagner. I mean,
Let's try it in the other direction, 4.5.
Is there a show of hands for 4.5? We have 4.
Mr.
Not enough.
Wexler.
Listen, here's the thing. Again, on every other vote in the history of this board, I tend to be the guy in the middle. I literally just wrote down, I'm the fifth with the higher folks, I'm the fifth with the lower folks. So y'all want to start paying some.
Mrs. Hall, did you get
dinners and
those
stuff,
reserves?
yeah.
Can we have Mrs. Hall share the reserves with us?
Yeah, so we've got about 50 million in cap reserve. That is our bond proceeds that are in there with cap projects. You already talked about 11 million and change in unassigned. Then you've got money that's in committed, about 3 million. That's for any future pension liabilities. We have some non-spendable and restricted at about 250,000. And then we have 17 million in assigned.
17 million.
Assigned.
And assigned.
Signed.
Well,
But
that,
in total, it's about 86,
So the total.
86 and change.
total reserve-
That's with cap and everything
the,
else.
the cap reserve, how much of that did we already commit to the 3-year projects that we committed to, like the stage and all that stuff? I know I feel like it's 30-some million. We already committed out of that.
We get that plan.
So total, everything's how much?
About 86 million.
86
million.
million.
But do I understand that only 11 million of that is unassigned?
Can fund balances that are, I'm sorry, can fund balances that are assigned be ever I know you can't do with cap reserve, could they be transferred, some of them to unassigned?
I do not believe so.
Okay. But point is, we are in very good financial shape, 86 million now, 50 million is for cap reserve, we're going to use that. But we developed that over the past 10, 15 years by extra money, designating 1 year for cap reserve, 5 million. We use taxpayer money to build up those reserves.
In order to take care of our facilities,
Agreed.
That weren't.
which is part of our job to do.
And to maintain our Moody rating. Ability to borrow.
That's the part that concerns me because while we're looking at the high school and we're doing some things, we still have Centerville Elementary School. And though we're putting roofs on LPC and LMS, they have not been renovated at all. Plus the fact
Those are the
that-
ones that are coated, right?
Yeah,
They're not
the
new
ones with-
roofs. They're substantially less expensive.
Yeah, and that's good. But I also worry the fact that though we were able with ESSER funds to replace the heating and ventilation systems in Mountville and Roarstown, those buildings are now getting to the point they're going to need new roofs going through with it. None of those buildings were built when you talk about all-day kindergarten or expanding or doing anything. None of those prototype buildings were built to have extra classrooms without doing really extensive renovations to them because of not so much that you can't do the renovation, but because the cafeteria and gymnasium are designed to have those extra classrooms being in there. So again, going through, and the fact that, you know, like it or not, I look at this Act 1 index, and between what we used last year and what Mr. Weberski and team was able to get it down to, there's only a 1.15% increase. And for the people that were here at the beginning of the discussions for negotiations with the teachers, we actually set the limit that we wanted the tax increase to not go beyond 1.5%. We're far below that, and that's for everything with it. So
I'm not following you, Mr. Donato.
at the beginning, before the elections, we had decided that any tax increase for the new collective bargaining agreement would not go above 1.5%. And we had lowered it going through there, but that was the initial thing, and we're only at 1.1.
That's not where we ended up.
No, I thought we were at 2.1.
We ended up over 2%
Yeah.
for that contract, Mr. Donato. That's why I wasn't tracking with you.
We obviously saved in other areas. to make up for that, correct? Jessica?
I don't know for sure exactly. I couldn't answer that specifically, but yeah,
That was for the teachers, but we wanted the budget not to go beyond 1.5%.
that's what our wish was. That's not where we landed. The
Yes,
fact of the matter is, we were over that. It's contributing to some of our costs today and some of our discussion tonight.
I guess I'm not sure where any of that past stuff affects today. We need to look at where we are today is where we are today, right?
Yep.
Contracts are signed.
Been done.
Anything else?
Yeah, I
Moving
and I
forward.
agree. Again, we're till 28, you're not changing it.
Correct. So there's no
So it's
point
not on
in
the table.
Yeah.
discussing it. I agree, Mr. Garber.
I think the point is we are trying to take care of multiple things. So
Is anybody willing to move their number to any point to get closer to 4 or above? Because it sounds like we're not going to end up below 4. Mr. Keener, are you even willing to come up to 4? I know that's a stretch.
I'm willing to do a lot of things if I see a strategic willingness, and so far I'm not seeing, so far no one has talked about it.
Well, you have that support from a number of us.
And may have thought I meant we need to have everything set in 2 weeks. That's not what I'm saying. I want to see the beginning of a meaningful process.
And I think you have the beginning of that, and it's just in its infancy stages because it was something that was only talked about within the last month.
That's right.
And I do believe in evaluation, a strategic evaluation. We'll see what it shows when we're done. We don't know where it's going to go. I have a pretty good idea, but we're going to go through the process and do it the right way and strategically take a look at it. And Mrs. Johnson committed to moving forward with that, starting with the Education Committee, because that's where it belonged. And if she felt it belonged, and I'm okay with that. I do believe it absolutely ties into everything else. It's not in a silo. But I think we have that commitment, Mr. Keener, to do that. I can tell you, as long as I'm on this board, I'm going to expect that we do that. It's fiscal responsibility. It's what you do.
I think you see it with the building. I think we are doing that because we're asking a lot of questions and pushing back the contractors.
Is it, I appreciate that, Mr. Butler. Is it realistic to think we can do the high school, a version of the high school project that gets us pretty close to where we want to be for around the $190 million?
No.
That's
And here's what I'll tell you. A little story. A firehouse costs $26 million.
Oh.
Just saying a firehouse, $26 million. So a firehouse is not an eighth of the high school.
I would just
Man.
suggest, having been through projects, your capital is not your major year-over-year problem. It's your operational expenses. And the operational expenses, whether you save $20 million on that project or not, it's pennies on the dollar when you look at the operational expenses year over year. That's the challenge we have when we look at it strategically.
One of the challenges. That is the bigger challenge. But we can't solve everything in one place. And I know that my math is going to be slightly off. If you look at Mrs. Hall's debt service for 211 million, it's 181 basis points, 177 basis points. If you knock each of them back by 10%, I understand the math is not perfect, then you're saving 18 basis points next year, 17 basis points the following year, and that flows through. That's a nice start. If we can save 40 or 50 basis points a year on operations, we're in a really good place. But sitting here saying we can't do that, no, it's going to be $211 million. It can't be 190. It can't even be 202 or 203. I'm not sure that we have asked the architects point blank, show us how different this project would be if we gave you this absolute cap. I don't think that we have asked that question.
We've asked,
We kind of did do
we've
that.
asked a lot of questions, Grant, and I want to point out, and I'd be glad to sit down with you. The time value of money and the interest rate we can get for those bonds will impact the taxpayers the least.
Mr.
Versus that little bit you're talking, it's better to take that extra and get the bonds that are stretched out over 20, 25 years. That's going to have less impact on the taxpayers than trying to make that building. And we didn't say it's going to come in at 211. It could be a little less. You saw how much the estimate came down just initially. You know, and we still have to approve the final number, which could change, correct, Mr. Bomersky?
Yeah, not only that, but now that we are basically done the schematic phase of this process, Badavia is going to take everything because we contract with them, they work for us, and they are going to cost it all out. And so right now, it's the ballpark of what the projection is of $210, $211 million. So that's why we need to start building in the debt service for that. Could it come in less? It could. The big tell is going to be this fall when Pennsbury School District, which is, they're building 500,000 square foot high school, goes out to bid. And we're going to get to see, while it's a slightly different area when talk about prevailing wage, but we'll get to see things around material, the cost, the square footage, and what that looks like. It could go really well as long as things continue moving that path. But we don't fully know until we get to that next stage, which is where we're getting to, because it is a process. I think the other piece that, you know, some of the things that I've heard tonight in terms of strategic looking, strategic effort, focusing on kind of that long term, that really needs to happen in the finance committee meetings. And so one of the things that I was going to be talking to you about, but I will throw out here is, just like we talked about kindergarten, making that a goal and kind of looking at what a plan looks like, that I think we look at as a district, setting a goal around looking at finances on a regular basis of that spend, but also the longer term projection of budgets, because it can't just be this year.
Right.
It has to be future years looking out. As you look at that Act 1 index, you're looking at it going down. Those are estimates. Could it change? Yes. I don't know that it's going to go up. It usually kind of trends in the down direction. However, we still have to be mindful that if there is a commitment from the board, recognizing we're not voting on the project, that won't happen until next spring. But if there's the commitment to keep moving, there has to be the commitment to fund that debt. That said, on top of that, you then have the additional budget. And so that's where, by doing the community meeting, when we were showing the community, this is what it's going to take. It is going to be more challenging in future years with Act 1 going down. And yes, needing to find ways to reduce expenses. And that is going to be having to live within the means if this high school project is essential to the district and the community at large. Because you aren't going to be able to get additional revenue coming in.
But to your point, Mr. Bomersky, and you're exactly right. By 2028, Mr. Graham, could you put up slide 8, please?
The
Yeah.
one thing to remember is the state changes those all the time. Last year, they went to 6.3, which was way above anything else because it was a catch up after COVID. When you look at the federal government, the state and all that stuff, they're easily could go the other way. They could do a catch up year again with all the federal money being spent. There is a lot of changes and variations to that as well.
Right.
But then you still have to be willing to utilize it.
I'm just,
You know what
everybody, everybody's getting so nervous that we're gonna go bankrupt. Just saying, there's options.
By the time we get to 28, 29, under these projections, we will have, assuming if I'm correct, that we needed 2% for the new teacher's contract, right? It was, but so that's 2% that goes into the increase to balance budget line that's not currently there. We will have 9 basis points, 0.09% to do everything else. Right?
Without reassessment that happens in 27 and without growth of West Hempfield, because there's a lot of opportunity there that's gonna happen as well. So there's a lot, there's so many things with the budget that you can only project so far with the budget, in my opinion.
Right. And we have additional things that we want to spend money on. I've heard broad support for full-day kindergarten, okay? I've heard broad support for a nice new concession stand. I've heard broad support for any number of expensive new money coming into this budget. I'm not saying if any of those things are good ideas or bad ideas, but I'm looking at a chart that says we have 9 basis points to play with 3 years from now. And that concerns me.
Well, that's for, when would the contract be renewed? What year?
28's the end.
What was it?
28 is the end.
So you're talking a couple years, but then after the additional money for the bond goes away, you're gonna have a lot more in year 29, 30. Because at one point, that debt service will go away.
Well, the debt service won't go away. The increases to
The
it won't
increase
go
to
away.
allow us to get the debt service.
So if we're lucky, the decrease in the Act One index by 2030, 2031 will bring us down so that we're only in the world of the 2 to 3% left. So yes, but
And it-
that's out, we don't know how that's gonna play.
And again, it doesn't take into account the need for other buildings to be addressed. And if there is excessive growth, do we need more building space?
We actually looked at that.
Yeah, we
Next 5 years, we have projected the cost, and that should be in that.
we
capital.
started some of those
Money
projects,
for
remember?
Some of them we did, yeah, but I'm like, a new Centerville Elementary School isn't in that budget plan.
Not the next 5 years.
Well, yeah, I
Right,
would
so you're
think,
gonna need to rebar. I'm just saying you're gonna
High
need
school
to be
project-
borrowing after
I
that.
think we want to get the high school project underway before we do something
Right, I'm
like
just
that.
saying you can't count on after the 5 years of that going away because you're gonna need it for other projects after the
Correct.
high school
But
project.
There may be a bunch of different options. There may be
Maybe.
merger, who knows? Well, I mean, we may expand some other buildings. We've talked about that, elementary.
We can,
And
I'm
that's-
trying to reel us back in again. We can
I-
talk about the building project. We got off track because I think Mr. Keener asked, can we get down to 190 million? I would just go back and say, look, we're going to continue to be as fiscally responsible for that building project as we can. We're looking at strategic initiatives moving forward related to operational expenses. And we're going to be doing that ongoing. It's not going to be an easy fix. But again, Mrs. Hall would like us to come together with a number. The last thing we want to do is delay this or come to a stalemate tonight or particularly at the next meeting because we can't agree. So some of us have come up, some of us have come down. Can we get to a number that we can agree on tonight? So we go into the next meeting where we at least have some kind of way to move this forward. I mean, we are not all going to agree on this. Like, frankly, I think I feel too high at 4, but I've moved to 4 because I feel like that's a sweet spot that gives us a little bit of risk with flat funding, but doesn't take on a huge amount of risk, believing that the funding probably won't be flat and hopefully we'll get some breaks with cyber charter schools. Those are all things that we live on a hope and a prayer because we don't know the answer to that. We don't know what those increases are going to be in assessed values in 2027. We don't know where the index is going to be. We're making a decision off of a lot of estimates and hypotheticals, and that's the best we have to work with. Do I believe there's huge risk at 4% and a huge problem in dipping into our massive savings? And it's not massive. I mean, dipping into that savings, it looks like a lot when you're talking a couple $100,000, but it's not a lot. And I believe it gives us some time to let this flesh out a little bit without taking a lot of risk and see where we land. I'm not interested in putting the district at financial risk, but I do believe part of that is looking strategically long-term at some of how we're spending operationally. And I believe there's a lot of opportunity there to the tune of millions of dollars that will not affect our educational outcomes. But we need to get close to a number. If nobody's willing to move, we are going to be at a stalemate and it is going to be a problem. Some of us have moved a little bit. Some of us haven't moved much. Is there any support? Because feeling like maybe Mr. Keener and Mr. Wagner, maybe you could get the 4% to get us closer to where we need to be. I know you're higher than that. You're much lower than that.
Come up half a point. I've moved.
I
more
know.
than anyone else.
I get it.
I've moved more than anyone else so far.
You were the furthest down too, but I'll leave that unsaid.
More than anyone else.
Is there any willingness for anybody to move closer to 4%? Which I feel like either that or somebody's got to take a big leap to 4.5 to 4.8.
Mrs. Hall, is there any chance, what do we have built in for additional revenue from new homes? And seems like there's a lot of activity. Is that already projected?
So we take in the total assessed value to project the real estate income.
Okay, but is there,
That's given to us by the county.
the county's given us the projected growth?
Well, no, they're giving us what our actual assessed value is. I can't project what's gonna happen in terms of growth. We project transfer and some of that stuff, but I'm not projecting what's gonna come on board, because we don't know.
So we don't know of any big
Not
complexes
that I'm
or
comfortable
things that are
building
being
in.
built that would,
That we're gonna collect on in the next fiscal year? I mean, no.
okay.
Is there any support for 4.3? It's not a number that's been thrown out there, but I know Mr. Wagner's been at 4.25 to break it down. I know there's been others at 4.5. Is there enough support for a 4.3 between the four of you and Mr. Wagner? You would be the deciding vote to move to that if those others would come down, but if nobody's willing to move, we're still at a stalemate.
Yeah, I mean, for me, 4.3, I mean, we're talking 0.05%. That's fine. Do I want to pull money out of our fund balance? Of course not, right? However, I also to be very careful with going too high. Again, for me, it's about striking a balance. Would I go to 4.3? Sure. Would I go to 4.2? Sure. For me, 4 does seem low. 4.5 seems high. And right now, I guess what I'm looking for is there's 4 on one side of me and 4 on the other side of me that can say all day long, hey, I've come up 0.2 or 0.5 or 0.3, or I've come down 0.2 or 0.3 or why am I the guy that has to move everywhere? What
Because
if
you were
nobody
on
else is willing to move, why
because
should
you
I?
brought up you're in the
Do
average.
anything.
So am I willing to go to 4.2 if there's people? Sure. 4.15, we're pushing it. 4.3, sure. 4.35, again, we're pushing it. Like, to me, again, I don't want to split hairs. I mean, we're talking about a tenth of a point, 95 grand.
Well, how
Right,
about
we're splitting hairs,
4.2? Can the four of us get behind 4.2? I don't want to be there, but if it means making a decision, I'm going to go there kicking and screaming.
And for the record, to answer the questions that have been put out, I mean, whatever we need to be doing to strategically look at things, frankly, whether this is a tax increase or not, I think we should be doing that anyway, to be quite honest. So that's beside the point to me. I think that has to be done. That's vital to me. So will it happen tonight or in the next 2 weeks? I think that's unrealistic and frankly irrational. What I do think is that something needs to be discussed on a serious level as to what our next steps are going to be. For today, a couple tenths of a point isn't going to kill the average taxpayer, frankly, any taxpayer. I would hope not. And it's also not going to break the budget of in 2026, $158 million budget. So I'm not going to sweat the small stuff and lose sleep over a tenth of a point or 1.5 tenths of a point. So
Well,
yeah,
you're not, but you understand there's people that are further away than that. And to
Oh.
get to where they are, we started on what I would consider Hempfield's higher side. I can't remember the
Yeah.
last time this district's ever raised taxes over 4%. Good, right, wrong,
almost
or
15
indifferent.
years. I mean, you go back and it hasn't, right? I mean,
So some people feel like they've already moved a lot to get close to you. So for them, it's not splitting hairs with all due
Yeah.
respect. They're already kind of at the ceiling.
2/10 of a point is $190,000 out of a $150 million budget.
Listen, can we get enough support for 4.2% potentially?
And
4.2%, which is getting those of us that are lower than that. That's above my ceiling. I'm trying to compromise here because we're going to have to compromise. Not everyone's going to get what they want. I'm willing to come up to 4.2% if that gets this done tonight. Is there anybody else willing to do that we would have enough? I'm going to get a straw
Can I
poll.
get Mr. Walker?
Yeah.
If I can get a firm commitment from 5 or 6 members of this board to undergo a meaningful, zero-based strategic planning process that addresses these things that are bothering, that are the real cost drivers here, sure. Honestly, I don't really care where we wind up this year.
As long as we have that strategic plan.
Strategic with you
Fix
if we
this
come to
problem
4.8.
long term.
So
And what we're doing right now isn't fixing it long term.
I agree with you.
I agree 100%. We need to look at that. I do think that we all have difference of opinion on what that looks like. And we all have to agree that we look at it open-minded and that not all of us are going to agree at the end of the day what that looks like.
And I think we've all agreed that it's just good business to
It is
look
good
at your
business.
operational expenses. And so I think you have that commitment. You've also had the commitment because we've already cut the cost of that building project. So you keep asking, do you have that commitment, Mr. Keener? I would tell you, you do have that commitment. Are we going to agree to disagree on that, on what that commitment looks like when we get that information? I think the answer to that's, to Mr. Garber's point, yes.
I guess that's my fear, because we do a really good job of having these debates, we compromise, and then nothing ever changes.
You're
Because
right.
One retreats back to, well, I engaged in good faith, and yeah, I think we do. But then we say, that's too hard. That's just the way it is. That's how public education is in Pennsylvania. All of those sorts of issues.
Sure, we make
And we
excuses.
never fix it.
So
Well, I
Vic-
think the high school is a proof in the pudding that there were 9 years of discussion with nothing getting done, and this board has moved that forward since I've been on the board. I wasn't part of that 9-year discussion. So I think we do have a track record of getting things done and not just giving it lip service.
So I would suggest that we start with putting a list together of things that we want to tackle and strategically look at how we can go about looking at those things. But I would like, Mr. Walker, I would be kicking and screaming, but I could get around 4.2 if we can get the majority.
We can get enough. So I've moved, some others may have to compromise. Is there enough support? I think, Mr. Wagner, you said you would support that loosely. I know I've come up enough. I didn't want to be here, didn't think I would move, but we have no choice but to come to some consensus and get a majority for this at the end of the day. Mr. Maris?
No. No on the 4.2.
Mr. Maris is a hard no.
Will you convene a task force to discuss the issues that we are talking about?
Don't make it about me.
Well, I could be in a task force.
That's already being done by Mrs.
That's
Johnston.
one piece of it.
Yeah.
But what are the,
I
I
believe,
mean, I guess I'm confused. What are the
I believe
components to that?
each-
We're
each
discussing
committee-
the high school renovation as we go through with that. Mrs. Johnson's talking about what Mr. Wagamuth is
That-
asked for to look at the high school.
So that's where I'm thinking that everybody you put everything on the wall. What's the goal? What's people think the problems are? And then each committee, the finance committee, the
Yeah,
building
we have
committee,
to be involved.
each committee addresses their part of the puzzle of what that looks like. That's where I think
Yeah,
we should go
it
back to
wouldn't
the-
be one-dimensional. We just suggested to start it there. But Mrs. Johnson's fully aware of the financial impact and the need for finance and the whole board, frankly, to be involved in that with administration.
You already said you were going to be doing that with the finance committee. And Building and Grounds is already doing it. I think actually we as a board, or at least many of us, I'm on two committees. Everybody's on two, right? We've made that commitment, just on the wrong committees.
I think we're saying the commitment's there. Just get back to the basics. I think we're trying to get to a number here, guys. Let's stay focused. I mean, we'll be here all night and if that's what we want, that's fine, but we'll be having the same discussion over and over again. Can we stay focused on coming up with a number? I've thrown out 4.2, higher than some of us want to be and lower than where others want to be. Can we split the average of all of this? Maybe back to your point, Mr. Wagner, and go with a 4.2 or a 4.3?
I'd like to raise another question, if I might, directly to you. We have our disagreements, as you've said, but you also did just say, I don't really care where it is if I can get this commitment. So I'd like to ask you, if you don't really care and we make this commitment, would you join us at 4.8 and then we would have 5?
Mrs. Brady, that was very well played and I commend you. No. What I meant was, I will move all of 3.5.
Oh, so you do care.
I do care.
Thought I'd try.
It was well played.
And I was serious.
I know you were.
You said yes. But it would be.
Is there 5 people that would be interested in coming down and up to 4.2 or 4.25 or 4.3? That we can get this moving forward tonight? We still have the contracts to review. I realize that's short, but we still have one more item on the agenda yet too. Mr. Maris is a hard no, obviously. So Mrs. Johnston, are you willing to move down a little bit? Mr. Garber, move up. Mr. Keener, move up. I mean, where do we go from here if nobody's willing to move?
I'd like to ask another question of the administration. If we don't meet the Act 1 index to balance the budget, is it your recommendation, given those choices, of borrowing from the fund or finding other places to remove things? What would happen? I mean, I kind of think we need to know.
So my recommendation is you wait. Obviously, Mrs. Hall would have to do the budget. It would
I mean,
come in-
I would have to do it,
Right.
that we're taking it away and then we.
You would take it out of fund balance. That would be the first piece. But we go through the year and we really wait and see, and we really start to scale back spending. And when things come up or those unexpected things, or, oh, this wasn't budgeted, then we say no. And what we're going to need is the commitment from the board, is that when you start to hear things in the community or start to hear from individuals that are saying, well, where's this? And why aren't we doing this? And why can't we find money for this? We need to tighten things up. And so that goes into play. We look at if positions come up, just like we do now, is it truly essential? Can they be replaced, not replaced? And we work through the year and we see if we can get, from a spending standpoint, to, in a way, balance the budget. You're not going to know until the very end. Mrs. Hall, please jump in here and correct it at any point if I'm off. But you're not going to know until the very end, when we start the audit and we see what those final numbers are. We'll have a ballpark and we'll kind of gauge and kind of see where we land. But case in point, the decision tonight on the science program is some additional savings right away on spend. So it's those pieces that we start to look at to start, okay, how do we bring things down? How do we start to do this? And we really have to gauge and keep you updated through the course of the year. And then at the end of the year, as we're working through the next round of the budget, starting next fall and into the winter, we are starting to have to make those adjustments based on what we're seeing from the spend. So you're not going to see necessarily any instant changes per se, because we're just not going to stop a program or not have staff in a specific area. It's going to evolve over the course of the next year as we start to see the ebbs and flows of dollars coming in or dollars, not. And then we are going to have more of those difficult budget conversations starting in the fall and carrying through the spring of next year. That's what's going to happen as a result, no matter where we land. And so I'm kind of wondering if some are at 4 and some are 4.8, do you split the middle and go 4.4?
I'm saying that, and with the reserves there, which I do not feel comfortable with. I did not feel comfortable with using the reserves, but if it is a smaller amount and as the year goes on, you guys are tasked with that, like you said, and you're obviously working with that and knowing that if that's what passes.
The reality is, the majority of the time, we do better than projected. 8 of the last 10 years, we had a surplus. So I'm confident the dollars we're talking about, I can't predict the future, and I don't have a crystal ball, that we're probably these dollars we're quibbling over are probably going to go away, because I have confidence in our administration, Mrs. Hall, Mr. Bomersky, that they'll watch the budget closely, and we'll probably save those 3, 4, 500,000. We won't have to take anything out of reserve.
But
I agree with you, Mr. Maris.
I would also say, though, is if additional dollars come in, and yes, we don't want to necessarily rely on that, but if they do, you also need to look long-term and starting to put those dollars away intentionally, that if you look out in 26, 27, you may not need to do 1.77 for the high school. You can
Right.
take those dollars and reduce that. And you can keep doing that strategically as you start to see the big things coming up.
We kind of did that, though. We've got the big capital reserve by doing that, right? Over the
Not
past 10
really, 'cause
years.
we dedicated a lot of those dollars for other buildings.
No, but I'm saying a lot of that came from surpluses.
Yes.
And we borrowed some money that we had an interest advantage to do it, a tax
It was
benefit.
the ESSER dollars that came in that we were using those district dollars. The ESSER dollars came in and those district dollars went to the capital.
Correct.
For a 3-year period.
Mr. Mayor,
Keener.
I feel compelled to say the same thing that I said to Mrs. Eshelman. Hope is not a strategy, okay? I mean.
I'm not saying hope, but we're quibbling over hundreds of thousands of dollars on a $150 million budget. 8 out of 10 times out of the past 10 years, we had a surplus. And I can recall back earlier when I was on the board, we almost always did better than projected. So, it's not hope. That's experience and statistics.
Right, but it's not, they don't inflate the budget now the way they did when you and I were new to the board. They inflated, we both know they inflated the budget and came in under every year.
Yeah,
They
dude.
no longer do that.
Yeah, we had
So,
$2 million in the budget previously, at least $1 million or $2 million at times. When I came on the board, it was just for extra things that would come.
Yeah, and
in.
that was stupid. It just confused everybody.
Yeah, but we're not doing that. And I think, again, they're pretty much
You asked us as a board to really look at how we're doing the budget. Last year, we were to the good $132,000 out of a $152 million budget.
Not a huge.
That's rounding.
About as good as it gets right there.
Yeah.
And that's because of how we're doing the budget differently. That is, unless there's a big swing of something that we're unsure of, that's what we're going to be seeing plus or minus.
What year did you start, Mr. Bomersky and Mrs. Hall? Was it 1819? Were you superintendent?
I was
1920.
I started in January of 20, so that budget was already in play and the budget process already started for the 2021 school year.
Was the 1920 numbers that you gave me,
The
Mrs. Hall?
COVID dollars were not included and to offset revenue and expenses in 21, 22, and 23.
But also 1920, we didn't pay for busing.
Correct.
We didn't pay for overtime. Like
Because
there's a
of
lot of
COVID.
things that's being.
So a lot of that savings was because of, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And now, as we started doing things differently, we are, COVID dollars coming in 23, 24, revenue offset expense. We honed in on what it was. So you can't bank on those dollars.
Of course, we only really have one data point, non-COVID, 23, 24, because I look back at 16, 17, we had an excess of 1.33 million. 18, 19, we had an excess of 808,000. And then, of course, we got into the COVID dollars. So,
I like that I'm hearing more positive things because we've been pretty negative about what we've been saying. Oh, the board didn't do this, we didn't do that. I think we've tried to do the best we could at the time for the year, whatever the circumstances were. The administration has done what we've asked. I propose again 4.4, and that means I've come down from 4.8. Just want to point that out. So, yeah. I know.
I did point out earlier that
Go ahead.
Yes, so.
did point out earlier that we're doing better than a lot of the districts. If you watch the newspaper, some of the other districts are projecting big shortfalls. I don't know, Mr. Bomersky, can you share any of those with us? I know Lancaster.
I don't think it's right for us to be sharing other districts. I mean,
Right.
that's out in the media and that's fine. Everyone does things differently and how they're
The
doing.
point
it.
is,
Yes.
what Mrs. Johnson said, we are doing a good job at Hempfield.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would agree.
And financially, we have a healthy reserve, both assigned and unassigned, a healthy capital reserve. I think we're doing very well, and I'm like, we're quibbling over hundreds of thousands of dollars in a $150 million budget. Mrs. Eshelman, I don't think we're going to have to cut things, and you want something written that we're not going to cut them.
I may think of it different. You may think $150,000 is not a lot of money. I think what that does, $150,000 is a teacher. So I think of it very differently. I think of what is that? It may seem insignificant to you, that number. It does not seem.
I didn't say it's insignificant. And
No, I'm just letting you know my thought process when it comes to thinking about those dollars, where your thought process is different.
so the 4 million to take a few $100,000 out of that 1 year when we've had surpluses many other years, I don't think is a big deal when we're taking a little heat off our taxpayers.
I think I moved on that. I did move on that because in the beginning, I was not willing to take from the reserves. I just heard Mr. Bomersky say at 4.4%, and then using the reserves to balance the budget, a lot like Mrs. Hall did to put the one up publicly, and then working throughout the year on those things, I think is a no-brainer. And I think it's something they are already committed to doing and will continue to do. So that's why, so I did move on the reserves and I did move to 4.4. So that was not something I was really keen on.
Right.
You know, and so,
Appreciate your comments.
so I'm willing as the work continues through the year to do that.
It's like herding cats with these discussions, to be honest with you. It's impossible. We're trying to get to a number. So the last I heard was 4.4%. Is there enough people interested in 4.4%? I'm looking to you, Mr. Wagner, because you were the closest to that you would be interested in moving the needle because it's only a 0.00 something percent. I'm exaggerating.
Mr. Dunn, I wasn't willing to do that either, so.
I mean, here's how I look at it too. Listen, I mean,
There's got to be compromise, guys. We got a board of 9 and we have to make a decision. Some of you are unwilling to move at all.
well, and I'll share with you the compromise. So if we started out with the originals, those that were on the high side wanted 4.5, 4.5, 4.8, and 4.5 respectively, right? To go to 4.3 is a 0.275 move. Those that started out low were 3.8, 3.8, 3.5, and 4. That's a 5.25 move or 0.525 move, double what others came down. So those that were coming up are moving double what those came down. So if you want my compromise number, I'm going to go back with 4.25.
You're right. Those of us that started lower have moved, and some of us. So where do you want to take this discussion? I mean, we literally will be here all night if nobody's willing to move. You're going to put your stake in the ground. We've got a problem because we have to come up with a tax rate. So somebody has to be willing to move or others have to be willing to move. I've come up from 3.8 to 4.2 and moved about 0.4. Some of you started at 4.8 and now you've come down to 4.5 or 4.4. So is anybody willing to do the 4.2 and split that difference? Can we revisit the 4.2 at this point? We are splitting hairs.
Yeah, and
In
listen,
fairness.
and listen, I mean, if you know, it's always funny to me. I was talking to someone earlier today, and it was like, well, will you go up another 1/10 of a point? And I'm like, well, why don't you come down 1/10 of a point?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same argument either way. Pick one and go, right? I mean, quite honest. I mean, 4.2, 4.3, choose one. The end.
I think the closest we're going to get is a 4.2 to 4.3 area.
Yep.
So you got to take a hard look at your decision and decide if you're willing to make adjustments to make that work. Those of you that are way high and those of you that are way low, and those of us that are somewhere in the middle. I think it's an appropriate tax increase. I think it takes care of the budget. It leaves some wiggle room depending with the flat funding and how that happens. I do not think 4.2 or 4.0 or even 3.8 will put the district at risk financially long-term. And so at the end of the day, we're at the 4.2 right now. Are there at least 5 people that could get behind that? Raise your hand if you can get behind the 4.2. We don't even have enough for 4.2.
Nope.
You want to go higher? 4.3. Can you get behind the 4.3?
One, two, 3, 4. Oh, there's 5. Oh, no, 4.
Listen, if
But I
I'm going to
thought
break the
that-
tie, I'm going to go to 4.3. I don't want to be there at all, but we have to come up with a decision.
There's 4.
So I think we can get there at 4.3. And if I have to be the tiebreaker for that at the meeting, I'll do it because we have to come up with a tax base and a rate for this administration to move forward. Listen, I'm not going to tell you I like it. I hate every bit of it. It's too much, but I don't really feel like I have a choice or we'll never get a decision made.
I don't disagree. I'm the same boat you're in. If that's what it takes, that's what it takes. But we have to leave this meeting and give the administration a fair shot
Yeah.
on the next meeting that we will agree to 4.3 if that's where we're at, because we can't vote the budget down.
But you didn't have your hand up.
4.3?
Yeah,
You didn't have your hand up either.
I did.
Yeah.
I said I verbally said I would
So
support it,
Just to
even though I don't want to.
just to
I said
recap.
the same thing.
Just to recap from last meeting, not that I want to go back there, but this is, I don't know, it's 8:01, so I'll be quick. So there were a number of people at 4.8 and there was a number of people at 3.8. And last time I did my math, a 0.5 point in either direction puts us at 4.3. Just want to throw that out there.
All right, okay, we're gonna end this portion of the meeting. I think we have at least somewhat of a consensus so we can go into this next meeting and come up with a tax rate. Some of you are gonna vote against it. Some of you are gonna vote kicking and screaming, probably on both ends of this. But we've come to some decision that I think the administration can hopefully almost hang their hat on. All right, we have contracts left yet. Let's move on to the contracts. We've got a number of contracts in here. Some of them are new, some of them are renewals. So does anybody have any questions about these contracts? My only question, and I'll start just because I need to, is why have we never had a contract for our yearbook and why is there a contract now for 3 years?
You always say.
Just renew.
Because it says it's new. What does new mean? Does it mean renewed? or it just means it's been changed? Maybe define new for me.
Yeah.
The yearbook says new, the Marco shredding says new, the MTI production says new. And my only question is, did we never have a contract there before?
We did, and we use that company now, so we can check on that. Because we're not voting on this tonight.
No, we're not voting on this tonight, I guess, and I just need to understand what new means. Does that mean it's newly negotiated or it's a brand new contract and we never had one before? Why are we locking in for 3 years? Better pricing, or is there something I'm missing? Because
Okay.
usually, okay.
And
that's fair.
also with this, there is no cost to us. This is the cost students pay. It's in and out.
Sure, I get it. I just
We'll
wanted
check
to
on it.
understand the
Yep.
contract piece and why we have additional contracts that are new and we have used them before.
Yep, we'll check.
Okay. Any other questions about the contracts? All right, hearing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Well, maybe I better go back. I'm sorry, hold up before we do that. Schedule of meetings is listed here. Our next meeting for Buildings and Grounds, Finance will be June 24th. I'm sorry, Mr. Donato, you had something to share?
Yes, before we go, I believe the resolution, when we had a break, was being passed around.
Yeah, it's gone around. Everyone's signed, I
Okay,
believe.
So
There's 9
that's
signatures
it.
here.
Thank you.
All right,
I'll make-
anything else for the good of the cause? All right, I'll just ask for a motion to adjourn in a second. Mr. Donato for motion, Mr. Garber, second. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.